time now. And we'll be able to get all of the rest of you on the show. Grant, what's up? I'm waiting on signal.
We're live now.
Okay. Oh, now we're live?
Yeah, and he's waiting on the YouTube.
Okay. Okay, I got it. All right, everybody. So I'm just going to go around now and give everybody the link so you can join us. And then I'm putting it on the blog, putting it on YouTube. And then putting it on Mastodon, because we are trying to get more involved on Mastodon. Okay, got it on the blog post, and now I just got to do the Mastodon, and there we go. Okay, so hopefully people will start joining the broadcast, and we're very excited to have this show today. I'll just go over really quick who's going to be here. We've got we're about to start right away with Ryan Shapiro from Property of the People, and then we have Tracy. We have the Freedom of the Press Foundation. Nathan Dyer is going to give us a state of the drop, the latest in SecureDrop. We've got Tracy Jaquith, who's going to go into a lot of the eventful things that happened this year at the Internet Archive. And then we will also have a talk later from MEC, really going into that a little bit more, and especially the effect on libraries overall, that all this really bad year attacking libraries. It's such a weird thing. I never thought I would see the day kind of thing when libraries are under attack, but that's what we face. Grant is going to give a great talk about social media and Grant, what is it?
Jury trials in the
jury trials in social media. There, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't write it down, and it's so interesting. I wanted to make sure you knew that it was coming. And then Ryan Sternlicht will give us his yearly VR update. Because we still love technology and we're still excited about it, even though we are sliding into this authoritarian regime run by billionaires. Yay! So much to look forward to. So let's get started. Glad to see people are coming on in chat. Oh, and the other thing I should let people know is, because this is a podcast and we're really trying to make these broadcasts more of a discussion, we are going to, and I can announce next month's guest will be Gavin Grimm, and he's going to come on and we're going to talk all about his Supreme Court case and a lot of the other challenges that he's been facing, that a lot of people have been facing lately, like homelessness and just, trying to get by with the way that it's just really hard to get. I know myself, I can only speak for myself. I literally have money in my bank account till about the week before I get paid. It's like, it's not quite making it to the next paycheck. So I'm really feeling this too. And I understand. And I have a job, like a good job that pays me every month, a decent wage. It should be enough to live on. What the hell, right? So I am feeling this. And the point is, if you have questions while we're talking about things, even when someone is sort of presenting, you feel free to put your question in chat and we'll answer it as soon as we can. All right. And you don't have to wait till the end is the point. Okay. So that's it for me. I would like to introduce our first guest. Oh, and I forgot our co-host, Andre Zabral, who I'm really excited to have here. Andre Zabral from the Aaron Swartz Institute, Brazil. And now for give me the correct name of the department you're working in, Andre.
Yeah, I'm at University of Virginia. I'm at the Karsh Institute of Democracy. We have a new lab, a digital technology for democracy lab. I'm here studying fake news and other things related to politics and democracy.
Yes. So you're going to be a very busy person for the next few years. And we're really excited to have you on the show. And we'll be talking about all that stuff here. So let's get started with our first guest, Ryan Shapiro. Ryan, how's it going? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Lisa. Andre, it's going.
It's going? Okay.
It's going.
Yeah. So the last time you were here was 2021, and you were telling us about your research and the documents you were able to FOIA about January 6th and January 6th insurrection. And it all seemed like we were talking about this horrible thing of the past that of course we were never going to have to deal with again because we learned our lesson and all that stuff. But it turns out that, well, gee, I don't know. It turns out a lot of things.
It does.
Yeah. It's a combination of, people didn't like Kamala. They thought that we were elitists. We are often seen on the coasts as these technology elitists, but somehow the billionaire elitists get a pass who are actual elitists.
Yeah, actual elitists, but better at marketing.
Better at marketing and giving their money away, even though they were mistreating their canvassers and all these things that we knew leading up to the election. And the truth and facts, logic and reason, they're not in play because racism is back, and really back in a big way. And I feel like, I bet a lot of people felt in England during Brexit when there was this like ridiculous thing on the ballot that of course wasn't going to pass. And then it passes. And then you're like looking at people around you like, oh my God, really? Like, you guys voted for this? I mean, that's kind of, that's kind of how I feel. I knew it was bad. I didn't think it was that bad. And the way that he was just insulting everybody and being, so hateful and so racist and so misogynistic and so transphobic. I just thought, and homophobic, don't forget that one. Xenophobic, really. Mm-hmm. It's anything. It's anything that isn't red, white, and blue America. And instead of putting money in his pocket. And putting money in his pocket on top of it, which happened so much. I actually linked to your 45 project in the blog post for the show. Because nothing to argue about, factually proven. We have the evidence. We're not gonna, there's nothing to argue about anymore. We're giving him a reasonably good economy to work with. So there's lots of money to pilfer. So now I'm going to shut up and let you talk. And I just wanted to sort of, catch up. We talked a little bit yesterday about what you would be saying and stuff. And I just would really like to hear, as far as like transparency and accountability, which is what we try to do when we FOIA, or I do more things on the local level in California when I'm filing public records requests about surveillance equipment. And hopefully that won't be affected, but it always affects everything a little bit everywhere when this kind of thing happens. People change their behavior just in case, because you kind of have this heavy thing over your head all the time now, and you're, worried about it. So tell us what are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Andre, for having me. It's an honor to be back for in Swartz Day. It's also tremendously dispiriting. I was reviewing my notes from the last time I spoke here, 2021. The name of that talk was FOIA and Fascism, Information Activism in the Age of Trump and Beyond. And like you said, this was a post-January 6th. We were picking up the pieces, trying to move forward. And at that time, I was having, let's call it a crisis of faith in the value of information activism in this age when facts just don't matter in the same way that they did. I mean, the economy for lies has always been more robust than the economy for truth, but we are seeing something categorically different at this point. And so Yeah, how I'm seeing the present situation, it's catastrophic. It truly is. Many of the worst, most avaricious, most malignant people are about to seize the reins of power in this country from, from the halls of power to the street level. Just many things are about to get much, much worse, in many cases for longer than our lifetimes, quite likely. I mean, the concentration of power that Trump and his fascist and grifter minions are coming in with is
Yeah.
just unprecedented. It's not just the malignancy of these people and the greed of these people. It's how unfettered they're going to be in enacting their genuinely odious plans. Everyone's so much more tired than last time. The administrative state is so much weaker than last time. And the Supreme Court itself has given them a blank check to commit whatever crimes he wants. He was barely hindered before, and that's when there were at least some restraints, and he wasn't as completely livid at there having been attempts to hold him accountability. And accountability is one of the things that I've been struggling with the most in terms of thinking about the work that we do at Property of the People. I'll give should I give like a sort of a brief history of how I got to be doing this work and the sort of
yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Oh yeah, totally. Great.
Cool. I'll keep it short though. So just for folks who may not know me, so I got into punk rock and when I was 12, late Reagan era, and that's always been really my sort of a huge part of my guiding light in terms of how I understood anything. I've hated the FBI since I was 12. First research paper, Sacco and Vanzetti. But listening to the dead Kennedys, minor threat, little kid. Either way, through punk rock, I got into animal rights activism, and then in 2001, the FBI designated the animal rights and environmental movements the #1 domestic terror threats in the United States. And this is despite the fact that neither of these movements, the animal rights or environmental movement, neither of these movements has ever once physically injured a single person in this country ever. And yet, #1 domestic terror threats. It's not mere rhetoric. It came along with a huge amount of resource allocation and had a deeply chilling impact on the animal rights and environmental movements that still felt to this day. Journalist Will Potter coined it the Green Scare. But and during this Green Scare period, so early 2000s, the FBI came after me and all my friends and tried to put us all in prison as terrorists for doing things like undercover investigations on factory farms, exposing horrific conditions in laboratories and animal experimentation laboratories. I managed to beat the charges against me in 2004, but many of my closest friends and colleagues were not so lucky. Then in 2005, there's passage of the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, or AETA, which dramatically expands the scope of federal felony terrorism charges for people doing animal rights or environmental activism. First people prosecuted under the AETA, it's worth noting, were animal rights activists who wrote anti-animal experimentation slogans on the sidewalk in chalk. Federal felony terrorism charges, writing pro-animal slogans on the sidewalk in chalk. And so I really didn't know what to do next. I had just finished a master's. I had expected to go to prison, but I managed to beat the charges against me. Didn't know what to do next. Like a lot of people don't know what to do next. I stayed in grad school and started a PhD. I did my PhD in the Department of Science, Technology, and Society at MIT. And what I really wanted to do is figure out how we got to this state of affairs where the FBI can come to designate two movements that have never physically injured a single person once in this country as the leading domestic terror threat. Not white supremacists who are killing people, not anti-abortionists who are killing people, but a bunch of puppy huggers. And I started using the Freedom of Information Act, which I didn't know very much about. I just knew it was there. FBI, first request I submitted on myself. FBI turned around and said, no, we don't have anything. And I'll be honest, as I've said before, my feelings were hurt. I thought I'd been more important than that, but I guess, I was like, oh, I guess it wasn't. So I started submitting requests from friends of mine who gave me, signed permission to do it. FBI kept turning around and saying, no, they don't have anything. And then I figured it out. Like, then I submitted a request on a friend of mine, and the FBI had chased her all around the country. You know, it's an open fact that the FBI has a mountain of documents on her, and they turned around and again said they don't have anything. It's like, oh, I get it. I'm being lied to. This is my fault. Despite having hated the FBI since I was a little kid, I just presumed at RIDS, the Records Information Dissemination Section, that's the FOIA shop at the FBI. I presumed that they weren't as that they were more of a bureaucratic appendage, not so mission driven like the rest of the bureau. And so I became obsessed with trying to get this information. I can't stand fucking being lied to. No one likes being lied to, but I get real twitchy about it. And which is not good news. Yeah, I was going to say it's not good news in this new era.
I prefer to get used to it. You have to let the lies just kind of wash over you.
I would say I'm working on trying to find myself a calmer person than I used to be, just for survival's sake. But so I started submitting thousands of requests. To get the information I wanted. It started to work. I mapped out a lot of the FBI's strategies for non-compliance with FOIA in ways that I was able to figure out workarounds for. It's just part of my dissertation research at MIT. And then the FBI just stopped complying because the Freedom of Information Act is one of the most underappreciated elements of the entire American experiment. The notion that the records of government are the property of the people and all we need to do to get them is to ask for them is radically democratic, but FOIA is broken. And one of the main reasons it's broken is that it has no penalties for non-compliance. So an agency that doesn't want to comply has no reason to. And then an agency that's overtly hostile to FOIA, as the FBI is. The FBI, which openly asserts that FOIA, at least as applied to FBI, is just flatly a threat to national security, has every incentive to not comply. So I sued. FOIA has no teeth. It has one baby tooth, which is you can sue, you can litigate to attempt to compel an agency to comply. And along with my good friend and attorney, Jeffrey Light, I sued the FBI in a whole bunch of animal rights related cases. What's supposed to happen is we're supposed to, the plaintiff and the FBI were supposed to come up with a joint schedule for the judge of how long it should probably take to do this. FBI turned around and said no, and they invoked a then sort of outdated but now much back and forth Cold War era FOIA secrecy doctrine known as mosaic theory to argue in federal court that my MIT FOIA dissertation research methodologies were themselves a threat to national security, so much so that they couldn't even tell us how, and they submitted it in the form of an ex parte in-camera declaration. So basically a secret letter from I think it was the deputy counterterrorism chief of the FBI to the judge about why they can't even tell us why my research methodologies were such a threat to national security. Unfortunately, as absurd as it is, it's the nicest thing that anyone's ever said about me. But,
That's right. You weaponized FOIA. So it's you
right.
weaponized FOIA, and Jason Leopold is the FOIA terrorist, and you guys wear your badges proudly.
Absolutely. And, Jason's a brother. We've worked closely together on so many things. And my attorney, who's also the co-founder of the organization, Property of the People, also has represented Jason in many, many suits. Jason and I have been co-plaintiffs in many suits. I love Jason. I can't speak highly enough about him as a person or his work.
Yes.
And so, the judge agreed with the FBI, unfortunately, which really slowed down my dissertation research. Much to my dissertation advisor's frustration, it then led me to expand out the scope of my research because it was just animal rights stuff that I wasn't allowed to do. And so I expanded dramatically. We went after records on the FBI targeting of Nelson Mandela. We were able to show that when Nelson Mandela finally got out of prison and came to the United States, to try to rally support for the end of apartheid, the FBI, which was designated, which was in charge of providing protection for him, used the opportunity to place a confidential informant within Mandela's inner circle in order to spy on him and the anti-apartheid movement, which they viewed the whole thing as a communist threat meant to undermine American security. But working with Jason, we sued for and got records on the CIA on CIA torture and the CIA spying on the Senate's efforts to get information about CIA black site torture. We did a whole host of broader FOIA work, largely pertaining to the targeting of dissent, especially progressive dissent in the name of national security. That's also when we went after records on Aaron, and were able to show that years before the JSTOR investigation and prosecution, the FBI had been looking at Aaron in the context of a absolutely preposterously looking at Aaron in the context of an Al-Qaeda international terrorism investigation. Just
yes,
absolutely.
And
yeah,
and people can find out the details on that if you go to the website. It's right up at the top. It says what Ryan Shapiro found out about Aaron's FBI record with a link, and I also linked to it in the blog post just so people could see. But that was a single email that got scooped up. We don't know what kind of thing it scooped up, if it was a national security letter or what it was,
right,
to the University of Pittsburgh's computer science department. And that gave him a mark. And this is the other point that I wanted you to clarify. While you're filing all of these FOIA requests for your PhD, you're also keeping track of the rejection codes, which so you can cross-reference them, because there is actually no source of information where you can look up what the codes mean. You just get something back with a code on it that says terrorist threat or whatever. And the reason why we know so much about these codes now, we know a lot more than we did. It was very much from your research, because you came up with that actual sort of list from your own work. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So, the FBI has classification codes for every offense within the FBI's purview. The FBI doesn't investigate all federal crimes, just a specific, fairly large, but a specific subset of federal crimes. And for each of those crimes, the FBI has a classification code, not classification in terms of secrecy, but classification as in terms of file classification. And some of these classification codes are public, and you can find them, but a whole lot of them are still classified or otherwise secret. And yeah, Property of the People, for years, we have aggressively worked to try to learn as much as we could to fill in the blanks of regarding what's essentially this FBI administrative metadata, which reveals a tremendous amount about what's going on. So frequently, if one's looking at an FBI document, especially if there's redactions on it, which there almost always are, it can be pretty hard for most people to really discern all that much from it. However, if the metadata is present, such as the classification codes and a variety of other codes are present, and one's able, now the FBI has started to redact those codes in part because we were able to make a lot of use of them. But if those codes are available, one is able to use that sort of metadata to really learn a tremendous amount more. And, Aaron was tied up, or rather, the FBI's preposterous looking at Aaron was tied up with a 315T investigation, which is the FBI international terrorism investigation, in this case of Al-Qaeda. We really don't know what the details are. Aaron's email appeared to be on a list, like a University of Pittsburgh computer science department, likely related list. We're not exactly sure why that's the case, but the FBI, perhaps with a national security letter, was obtaining that list and other information from the University of Pittsburgh in the course of a 315T international terrorism investigation of Al-Qaeda. And then, so when the FBI was then later searching for information on Aaron, when the DOJ was again going after him, it brought up this hit to this previous, this guy was associated with this previous investigation of Al-Qaeda, which, it's just deeply disturbing on so many levels. There's a limit to how much we can say about it, because
we don't know.
So much of it is still shrouded in secrecy. But the little bit we can say is just, of course, deeply disturbing. Yeah. So
it casts a shadow is the point. So when the feds were wondering about him and they go look it up, instead of nothing being there, or the Pacer, because we think it was after he did Pacer that they were kind of looking at him again. And the Pacer project, again, was that because you have to actually pay to download the cases from Pacer where they're all stored. But they had a free download program every 22,000 square miles or something. So Aaron found a friend that lived next to the library and began bulk downloading the Pacer documents as fast as he could, which again, this is Pacer. So it's not all that fast, but it's being automated. So they're just keeping going. So they just let it run. And he ended up with, I don't know if it was 1 million, but it was close to that. Then he uploaded them to the Internet Archive for safekeeping. And so this was, again, he hadn't done anything wrong, hadn't done anything illegal, but everyone admits that. But it got on the Fed's radar. And then when they looked him up, they found this record. So this may be why they were messing with him. There could be other reasons that we don't know about, why they thought he had done this or that. But that was really valuable information when we figured it out. I think it was 2018. Because
that sounds about right.
Yeah, because we didn't know what it could have possibly been, and why they kind of had it in, for him. Trying to find ways. It was really like they wanted to go after him,
right? And
they couldn't figure out a way to do it because he wasn't breaking any laws.
Right.
And then he still wasn't breaking any laws. We know now when he downloaded all the JSTOR stuff because there were contracts between MIT and Harvard for employees. He was an employee, an ethics fellow at Harvard at the time when this whole thing happened. So he already had the legal right to download as much as he wanted. But we didn't find that out until a couple months after his death. His new attorneys had uncovered that information and hadn't told him yet. So he didn't know. And everything was just looking really dire at the time. And so it's really horrible the way that the timing played out, really, because if he'd have held on for like another couple of weeks even, he would have gotten the good news and probably wouldn't have felt so dire about it. But it had been going on for so long. It'd been like 2 years, this grand jury. And it was literally a grand jury in search of a crime.
Yeah. As so many of them are.
As so many of them are. And since they're all done in secret and they can just, what they do is, accuse you of like 20 different things. So the time is so long if you were to get convicted that you have to do some kind of plea bargain. And we have a great talk on our website that Brewster did, Plea Bargaining as a Form of Torture, where he talks very specifically about how this was done to Aaron. But Aaron, this is really important, is not an isolated incident. This is what these secret grand juries do. And it's another thing that, it's another kind of strike against our democracy in terms of the secret courts and things that still exist, the FISA courts and these and the things like that still existed that we've never kind of fixed. We've never done anything about it, even though we're the last country. I think us and Liberia are the last 2 countries to have grand juries. So let's move on. Maybe I should show that January 6th clip and then.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll say one thing. So
okay, sure.
Skipping ahead, blah blah blah. Jeff, my attorney, and I were always planning to scale up the work we were doing, which at the time was just grad student and as attorney friend. We're always planning to scale it up as like a nonprofit transparency organization. But after I finished the PhD, then when Trump got elected the first time, we were horrified. It's not that we were fans of Hillary Clinton, but obviously we were just appalled at Trump's election. I mean, I've done anti-fascist work for, essentially for forever, since, fighting Nazi skinheads on the street since I was like a young teenager. And, we knew exactly what we were looking at. And so we basically immediately scaled up in order to go after the Trump administration in any way we could. And we did it. And, we did expose exposed many things, domestic emoluments violations, so Trump's violations of the Constitution. We had the actual receipts showing money going from taxpayers into Trump's pockets at Mar-a-Lago. And then, skipping forward, and then when January 6th happened, we really wanted to understand how this came to occur, like in terms of like, why hadn't federal intelligence or other law enforcement stopped this attempted coup from happening? And so,
yeah, how did they not know? It turns out they did know. And they knew it was coming, and local law enforcement. And we also know there were some Capitol Police fought very hard and were hurt, that shot and killed. I think one person died. It wasn't all the cops that were bad. I just want to start off with that, because some of them were trying very hard. But the Capitol Police as a whole may have been, I don't know, in on it. They knew something was happening, and they just were holding back on stopping it.
It's from my perspective, it's less that the cops were in on it or that federal intelligence knew it was coming, as much as they were watching it and they just didn't perceive it to be a real threat. Because from the perspective of law enforcement, and especially of the FBI, since even before it was the FBI, when it's just a young J. Edgar Hoover coordinating the Palmer raids in the wake of World War I, the FBI understands threats to come from the left. At its core, the FBI is a political police force that primarily targets the left, while historically ignoring or outright aiding the far right. I know Trump and MAGAverse scream about how the FBI is a leftist entity. It's an absolute absurdity. And so one of the reasons that this was allowed to happen, and you're playing a clip where I believe I go into this more, but the issue isn't that federal intelligence agencies weren't paying attention. They saw it coming. They just didn't think it was a real threat, because from the perspective, especially prior to January 6th, from the perspective of federal intelligence and law enforcement, real threats come from the left.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's look. I'm going to share my screen and we'll look at that. Look at this clip. And all good? Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And so, we have a lot of, we've gotten a lot of documents along those lines, which, I certainly felt very important to get out. And we've gotten a lot of extremely important information about January 6th and who knew what when. We got documents, again, just absolutely showing that the intelligence was there. We have documents showing that the fusion centers and the FBI held conference calls in advance discussing the threat. The Washington Post's recent giant red flags pre-January 6th feature, repeatedly has our work in it. We got the FBI documents showing that so Capitol Police leadership claimed that there was an intelligence failure, so there was no way they could have known it was coming. We got FBI documents showing that not only were Capitol Police leadership provided with the frequencies that the coup plotters were using in advance of the attempted coup, but Capitol Police leadership was literally provided with pre-programmed radios, pre-programmed to those stations that the coup plotters were using. And when Reuters put out this bullshit article about FBI saying there was very little coordination, that it was a spontaneous thing, and this article is based on the word of 4 anonymous current and former law enforcement officials, we were able to put out this document, this Department of Homeland Security document, where the headline is "Tactics Used to Breach U.S. Capitol Building on 6 January 2021 Highlight Advanced Preparations." Just countering the bullshit. We got documents showing that law enforcement, FBI, and fusion centers discussed the possibility of January 6th being a mass casualty event. So, the idea that this was some sort of intelligence failure that they didn't know in advance is simply not true. And one of the, I think a particularly telling document that we got is this one. So this is an internal FBI email from January 5th. This January 5th document is really interesting to me. Here we can see, Washington State Fusion Center, this is FBI talking about it. Washington State Fusion Center intelligence analysts have noted comments by some Washington State residents planning to travel armed to Washington, D.C. for tomorrow's protest there. So a heads up that there may be incoming requests for checks should any of them end up in reporting. This is FBI knowing that, armed right-wing militia types are heading to D.C. And so it's not that they didn't know, but what's especially striking here is how casual they are about it. It's, oh, by the way, here's a heads up. You may have to issue a report. So you might be getting a request for information about someone. Again, contrast this with the hyper-militarized, violent response to peaceful protests by Black Lives Matter and other social justice activists. Literally, it's like, yeah, we have armed right-wingers going to the Capitol. Be ready. You may have to send an email about it. So it's not that they didn't know. The issue here isn't that it was an intelligence failure. January 6th wasn't an intelligence failure. It was a political failure by U.S. intelligence and law enforcement. As I said, even before the FBI was called the FBI, when it was just a young J. Edgar Hoover coordinating the Palmer raids in the wake of World War I, the FBI at its core has been a political police force that primarily targets the left. Threats come from the left. Real threats come from the left. That's the understanding of the FBI, Capitol Police leadership, and much of U.S. intelligence and law enforcement to begin with. And so it's not that they didn't know it's not that they didn't have the information. It's not even that they weren't looking at and talking about the information. It's that because of their political bias, that real threats come from the left, whether it be puppy huggers, people who don't want police to murder people with impunity, what have you. Real threats come from the left, and no matter the fact that they're coming, that these right wingers are coming heavily armed to the U.S. Capitol, all that matters, all that requires is maybe you'll have to send off an email about it. So it sort of brings me to a question that I've been struggling with, and it started, I really started struggling with it during, during the Trump presidency. As I said, we put out here, let's get back there. We put out numerous stories showing clear violations of the Constitution by Trump, right? Like just clear violations. These are documents that in any previous administration would have sunk the presidency without question. Just without question, clear violations of the Constitution, violation of the domestic anti-bribery clause of the Constitution. But fucking nothing happened. Nothing. Like nothing. And just with the what gets called fake news, just the increasing relevance of truth in the media economy and in the information economy. I really started to have this feeling of like, what's the fucking point, right? Like, we get all this information, we get it out there, people care about it, but nothing happens. And with January 6th, that's really only, this feeling has only been intensified for me, because it's the same goddamn thing that we've been highlighting for years and years and years, and so many other people as well, right? FBI and other law enforcement absurd targeting of the left while completely ignoring or even partnering with the far right and even open fascists. And so,
okay.
Sure.
Hey, sorry, hold on a second. I'm having trouble. It's funny. Why can't I? Okay, sorry about that. I was having trouble coming back. So yeah, so that I was shocked again looking back in the wake, because I was looking at it last night, getting ready to have you on the show. And the fact that we already have a situation where he did this incredible thing and it got encouraged people to do a thing. And after he had already done all these other illegal things, and it doesn't matter, because of this bias, against the left. So yeah, now that I sort of refreshed of the details of the January 6th stuff that you already uncovered. And then what are your thoughts moving forward after seeing that again?
As I alluded to at the beginning today, just deeply fucking dispiriting. I was having this crisis of faith then. As I said, what's the fucking point, right? We put out all this information. We exposed again and again and again unambiguous violations of the Constitution by the president, and it doesn't get us anywhere. Now a few years later, the situation is so much worse than even then. It's not just violations of the Constitution, in terms of grifting off taxpayers. Dude coordinated or orchestrated, called for, and cited a fucking attempted coup of the United States government. And now the charges are being dropped. Nothing. I mean, it's worth noting that historically, when those who orchestrate failed coups are not, let's say, rigorously punished for it, and Bolsonaro appears to be neutered as a result of this. When those who coordinate failed coups are not rigorously punished for it, that failed coup is just a dry run for the next time, which is where we are now. January 6th coup plotters have succeeded. January 6th has succeeded. Those who incited the January 6th attempted coup are now preparing to assume essentially unprecedented in the modern era power in the United States, quite probably all branches of government. It looks like the House is still holding it by a teeny bit, but it doesn't look good. And so one of the things that we used to say, like to the people that are like our self-understanding of our mission, especially during the first Trump regime, was transparency and accountability for the Trump administration, for the Trump regime. There is no accountability. Like that's not something that we're thinking about anymore, because again, it's not just the violations of the Constitution in terms of domestic emoluments violations and all that. We're talking about genuine treason, unambiguous attempt to take over the government. And now he is about to take back the White House. So accountability is gone. So this time around, Property of the People isn't gearing up to expose the same sort of crimes by the president that we did last time, because the Supreme Court has given him immunity and he knows it. So I don't think any of us should be thinking about accountability for the Trump regime. I think the situation is far more dire than that. This is a brace for impact situation. Like, just when at the top of the show, you asked my assessment of the present situation. Catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic. Like I said, many of the worst, most avaricious, most malignant people are about to take virtually unprecedented control of the country. We're seeing online just the immediate popularization of pro-rape sentiment from from so many young men, young women in high school are being accosted by young men chanting pro-rape slogans. It's just absolutely revolting and terrifying. So it's not just that we're looking at threats from above, right? From the Trump regime coming in, which we absolutely are, but it's really at all levels. And what we need to be doing, I mean, Property of the People is absolutely going to continue to go after documents about mass surveillance programs, the targeting of activists, really attacks on progressive speech, all of these things. We're absolutely here. We're in this fight. It's not accountability now, it's survival. And for all of us, and the only way that any of us really are going to get through this is together, fiercely supporting, defending, protecting each other, for ourselves, for our communities, and honestly, for the survival of anything decent is really our only hope moving forward.
Wow. Oh, Andre, is there anything you'd like to ask? You've been quiet the whole time, and I know you've got to have burning questions. Take it away.
Yeah, I was wondering, we have this reliance on institutions like to punish or make accountable, but how do you see political power coming from other sources like movements or organizations? Or what do you think about it? What can we do in a situation like this where institutions won't help us as much?
I mean, I'm still trying to figure this out too, right? It's I really wasn't sure what I was going to say today, because I am still, I mean, I'll be transparent about it also. I'm not going to say that I was a fan of Harris, but I certainly hoped that she would win and Trump would lose. And I'm still dealing with the shock of the fact that somehow this fucking country has reelected this goddamn traitor, this racist, misogynistic, just absolutely abhorrent individuals, one of the worst people, surrounded by a team of some of the absolute worst people, and have voted him back in. Probably the people put out a bunch of intelligence documents right, a week or so before the election, showing how federal intelligence agencies are this time around bracing for violence from MAGA, from Trump supporters as a result of January 6th and as a result of, Trump's ongoing incitement of his followers to immigration and election-related violence. And so, like so many others, we were really expecting that sort of outcome, maybe either a Harris victory or an undecided,
something close at least.
Yeah,
at least a close race.
Yeah, right. Something that was something being dragged out, and then we'd have to deal with fascist violence.
Yeah.
But the reality is far worse. And I don't know, in terms of like what we should be doing. I mean, one, we should not be obeying in advance. A lot of people, everyone is so much more tired this time around. It's true, myself included. It's been hard years. And the Trump regime, the pandemic, and the prices, everything. It's important that everyone remember not to obey in advance, not to get in. It's about to get dark, probably much darker, I think, than a lot of people, even people who are like, oh, wow, this is really bad. I don't think people are fully recognizing just how, I keep saying catastrophic, but I mean how catastrophic it is. Beyond that, well, as I said, I've gotten to, we really need to be focusing on community, on supporting each other and protecting each other, because not everyone is going to be targeted at once. The way that fascism comes in, it's not targeting everyone at once. Fascism really works by atomizing society, breaking people down. And so everyone feels very alone. And so they're not helping their neighbors. They're not helping their community members because they feel helpless and alone. And then there's no one there when they need help too. So I think we need to really start shoring up our community connections. And beyond that, probably the people who's going to continue going after these records. The Republicans are talking about stripping nonprofit status from nonprofits who, essentially do what we do, under anti-terror, like under the rubric of anti-terrorism. So the rights that we have are, to say that they're deeply imperiled is to really understate the case. So we should all be doing everything we can in terms of, assisting and building community and doing everything we can, whatever someone's individual abilities are. That's what we should be bringing to bear. This is a struggle for survival now. Like, this is not about accountability. This is a struggle for survival. And I think the very first thing is people need to wake up to that dire fact.
Yes. Yeah. First rule, self-care. Take care of yourself. Keep your health up, because you're going to work yourself to the bone anyway. And if you're not keeping that in mind, then you'll just burn out early, and then you get sick, and then you can't do anything. So I'm really trying to emphasize to people to take care of themselves and each other, and to keep an eye on that as sort of the first thing at the top of the list, and then fight to the death, and not to the death. Actually, don't fight to the death. Don't throw yourself away for the cause. It's not worth it. Do everything but. Don't wear yourself out, because there's more of them than us, and stuff like that. But what do you think in terms of FOIA? Do you think that he would just eradicate FOIA? He could, right?
I mean, it would take Congress to go along with that. And I don't think that Congress is going to straight up eradicate FOIA. Congress likes FOIA because FOIA doesn't apply to Congress. So it's easy for Congress to like FOIA. That said, federal agents, a lot of federal agencies, especially the intelligence agencies, are already so not just allergic, but overtly hostile to FOIA. And Trump's going to continue appointing judges. Those judges are going to, honestly, my real fear with FOIA is not that it's going to go away, but that how it's going to be administered in court is going to be increasingly lopsided. Trump-appointed judges are going to, I fear the Trump-appointed judges are going to disproportionately favor, say, FOIA requesters, FOIA litigants who are searching for information that to target liberal, progressive entities, whereas folks seeking to push back on the police state, the security state, on the regime, will all get denied. So it's less that I think that FOIA is going to go away as much as it's going to be increasingly neutered. I fear it'll be increasingly neutered for folks on the left and
right.
Yeah.
It will be
that's right.
And you talk optimistically to me about Congress still having some kind of power. I thought that was, he's got the Senate. We don't know about the House yet, but I thought one of the first things he was going to do probably is get rid of that pesky Congress.
There's no reason to get rid of it when it's going to do what he wants. It's not that Congress will be without power. It's that power will be marshaled pursuant of Trump's agenda.
Okay. Well, on that uplifting note, yeah. But again, I myself, I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
But I was going to say, I also encourage everyone to go to our website, proptothepeople.org. If you can, please help us out. Please donate. FOIA litigation, this sort of work, it is really expensive, and we are fighting just such a tremendously uphill battle. Any support that anyone can offer, we would really deeply appreciate. We are all in this together. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Ryan. I really appreciate it. And
thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and keep up the good work. And we will be bringing you back on. Actually, we're going to have these podcasts monthly, at least monthly, if not more, in 2025. And we'll come back when something interesting happens. Please come back and tell us about it.
I'd love that. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. And thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. So next we have Nathan Dyer from Freedom of the Press Foundation. Hey, Nathan, how's it going?
Hi, Lisa. Going well. How are you?
Great. I am actually doing okay, despite everything. I'm trying to keep positive and just being ready to help who needs it, and trying to follow my own advice as far as taking care of myself, because I don't always do that. And just happy to have you here. And it's actually always one of the more uplifting talks when we get to hear about all the great work that SecureDrop has been doing. It's almost comical how much you're able to get done every year. And why don't you take it away and tell us about it?
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for letting us do this. It's an absolute honor to be here and presenting this. I'm getting ready to share my screen here. I have some slides to go along with this. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to give the annual State of the Drop for SecureDrop. So my name is Nathan Dyer. I'm the Newsroom Support Engineer at Freedom of the Press Foundation, and I work on the SecureDrop team. So for those who don't know, the Freedom of the Press Foundation is a nonprofit organization working to defend press freedom. And we do this in a number of ways, from maintaining software like SecureDrop and Danger Zone, which is a file sanitization tool, to providing digital security training to journalists, maintaining the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker, which is a database of press freedom incidents in the United States, and advocacy work. And we currently have a team of around 7 people working full-time on SecureDrop. This was a photo that we took. This was taken by Julio, a security engineer on our team, in a recent retreat that we had in Asheville, North Carolina. And it was a great time for us to get together and think about the future of the project and tackle some of the really big challenges that we've been working through as we've developed SecureDrop over the past year and even longer. And of course, it's worth mentioning here that our thoughts are with everyone in Asheville that was devastated by Hurricane Helene. Before I get into kind of the news that's happened around SecureDrop, specifically within the past year, I wanted to mention what SecureDrop is for folks who might not be aware of the project. So really at its heart, SecureDrop is a whistleblowing platform. It allows organizations and journalists to receive documents and messages from anonymous sources. Really, you can receive any file from anyone. And it's particularly well suited to provide protections for high-risk sources. So those whose livelihoods or well-being would be really impacted should their identity or their activities be made known. But not only does it protect sources, it protects journalists as well, especially when it comes to malware. So you can imagine, this is out there on the internet. They're asking for folks to send files to them, but receiving files from strangers on the internet is dangerous. So we do what we can to help protect journalists, especially when it comes to malware. And we do that through a number of different ways, but one that's worth calling out here is the air gap. So when journalists go to actually review what is submitted to them, they need to download the encrypted version of those documents. They put them on an encrypted USB drive, and they walk them over to a totally different computer, one that is non-networked. It's in an air gap, and the private key that is used to unlock those submissions only lives on that one laptop. So it's completely cut off from the world, and anything they open on there, it isn't allowed to spread. It can't get out. It can't phone home. So it's just protections there for the journalists. And the reason we're here talking about this today, it's absolutely worth calling out that SecureDrop was originally designed and developed by Aaron Swartz and Kevin Polson. So this is something that was really important to Aaron. It was something that he was thinking about. And of course, now with everything going on and the discussion that we just had, SecureDrop is arguably more important now than ever. But all of that is a really high-level overview of SecureDrop. I encourage everyone that's watching or listening, please check out SecureDrop.org. We have extensive documentation. Anything you could want to know about SecureDrop is there. This is just to highlight some of the organizations that are using SecureDrop. It's used by about 70 organizations worldwide that we know of. It's open source, so anyone can go and get it and install it, and they don't necessarily have to tell us they did it. But we know of about 70 organizations. They range from large media organizations like The Guardian and the New York Times to groups with a narrower focus like Whistleblower Aid and the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. So that's SecureDrop in a really big overview, but let's talk about what's new from the past year since we last did this. And the first thing that I want to highlight is that we've had several organizations who have either done a fresh installation or have reactivated their SecureDrop instances. And not only have they gone through that process, but they've reached out to us. We've done our security vetting of them. So we look at their landing page, basically their tips page, make sure that it meets our security standards. And then when they do, we add them to our online directory where we list those other SecureDrops. So looking at 2024, just in numbers, SecureDrop Server has had 4 releases. There was the 2.80 release, which added Till 6 support. The 2.90 release added distributed denial of service attack protection for the Tor Onion services. We had a 2.10.0 release, which focused on security audit fixes, and we'll definitely be talking more about that security audit here in just a minute. And then we had a 2.10.1 release. It was a point release that added translations on top of the 2.10.0 release. And likewise, we've been busy with SecureDrop Workstation, which is something else that I'll talk about here in just a moment. But SecureDrop Workstation has had 7 major releases across both the workstation and client repositories, as well as 5-point releases. So those are the numbers, but let's look at the highlights in particular. And we'll start off talking about the workstation in particular, because this has been a big area of focus for the entire team. And it's something that we'll continue working hard on, as long as we can. So SecureDrop Workstation, for those who don't know, it's a unified workstation that's built on top of CubesOS. CubesOS is an operating system that is made up of virtual machines, essentially, and those machines have special properties in place where it controls what information can flow between them, and you can even limit things like network access per VM. And so the benefit of the workstation is that it dramatically reduces the time that it takes for journalists to review submissions. I mentioned before that when they want to actually look at what was sent to them, they have to go online on their own special workstation. They have to download the encrypted submission, walk it over to this other laptop and look at things there. With this new system, with this workstation, they can do all of that on one computer. We're able to take advantage of these virtual machines in a way that still keeps all of the same security properties from the original system, but does it in a way that's way more convenient. And one really nice thing to call out about this system is that when you open a file that someone sends you, these submissions, they open in a burner VM. So it basically it spins up in a new virtual machine where you can look at the submission, you can export it, you can print it, you can work with it however you need. And then when you're done, you just click the X button and it disappears. It's like it never existed in the first place. So this is just a screenshot that I wanted to show of what the workstation or what the client application on the workstation looks like. In the background, you can see there's kind of a threaded conversation view, almost like a chat app or an email client. And what you're looking at there is a conversation between a journalist and a source. And then in the foreground, in this other window, that's what it looks like when you open a file. It actually it creates a new virtual machine, it opens it in that virtual machine, and from there you can read what someone sent you, you can print it, you can export it, anything you want to do.
So I got to ask, so are you saying that the technology has advanced to the point where these virtual air gaps aren't just a joke? I don't have to laugh when I see that?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, this was, a decade ago, this was just a dream, but now Qubes OS and a lot of the technologies that go into Qubes OS, it makes it possible. So we can have a much more convenient system for journalists. And that's really what we've been focused on in 2024 in particular. So the big thing we wanted to do, we had a pilot phase for the workstation where we were working with a small number of organizations where they were actually kind of using it in their newsroom, checking everything out for us and letting us know where the rough edges were. Over this past year, back in July, we were able to release a 1.0.0 version that corresponded with the Qubes 4.2 release. And so with that, SecureDrop Workstation is now in public beta. So if there's a news organization out there that's already using SecureDrop and you are interested in using the workstation, please reach out to us. We'd love to have a conversation with you. But not only is it now in a public beta, we've been able to broaden printing support to over 100 different file types, and we've added in Veracrypt support. So if you want, you can export to an encrypted Veracrypt drive and actually take that to your primary workstation to work with further. And of course,
what is Veracrypt, real quick? I'm probably the only person that doesn't know, but I don't know. So
Veracrypt is essentially just a type of encryption. There are different types. On Linux, there's a popular one called Lux, but Veracrypt is it's a cross-platform encryption scheme. So the nice thing is you can use a Veracrypt drive to export submissions onto it, and then your Mac or your Windows machine, they can read it too. So it's just an encryption format that everybody can kind of understand.
Cool.
Awesome. I appreciate you asking that so I can clarify. And of course, like I say, there's more to come. We are working really hard on the workstation. We're also working really hard on the server as well. This year, we wanted to highlight a server audit. So we had a security audit of the server by 7A Security. It was sponsored by the Open Technology Fund. It uncovered 1 medium severity and 2 low severity issues, and they were all fixed in SecureDrop 2.10.0. We're happy to report that they did not find any critical issues. This was the first security audit since 2018. And the really nice thing about this audit was they didn't just look at the code. They looked at the overall threat model, and then they were able to come back to us and provide some critical feedback and hardening recommendations for evolving threats. So that was really nice to see. And I just wanted to call out one quote that was in the audit report. They said, "The SecureDrop project defended itself well against a broad range of attack vectors," which we were certainly glad to hear that. Of course, you can read that for yourself. It's in the audit report. If you go to securedrop.org/research, you'll see this audit report, previous audit reports, and all the research that we've been doing. Which is something that we've been focusing on a lot this past year as well. We have some ongoing research, in particular in 2 areas. There's SecureDrop Protocol, which is an end-to-end protocol for whistleblowing applications. which does not preserve source state. And then there's WebCat, which allows us or anyone to deploy tamper-proof JavaScript. And both of those are key requirements for the next version of SecureDrop, which would support deployment on untrusted hardware. So right now, when a news organization installs SecureDrop, it is installed on physical hardware that's actually located in the newsroom itself, and they're the only ones that have access to it. We certainly don't. No other third parties have access to it. The nice thing about the next version of SecureDrop is that it would support deployment on untrusted hardware, but it would still have the same security properties for whistleblowers. And again, check out securedrop.org/research for what we've already published and what we will be publishing in the future.
That's great. Hey, is the SecureDrop protocol, go back to the other slide real quick.
Absolutely.
Is the SecureDrop protocol and that WebCat, the secure JavaScript, are those available for anyone to use?
The research is available for people to read about. It's still in early phases. There are some prototypes.
WebCat isn't ready for prime time yet. You can't just go use it.
It's not ready quite yet. We're still doing the research, but absolutely. But yes, be sure to keep an eye on securedrop.org/research, and more things will be coming out in the public very soon about that.
The current version is a problem in an untrusted machine. What entails the problem in using it in an untrusted machine now?
So the problem with using it in an untrusted machine, the way it's set up with the security threat is that essentially if someone were to gain access to that system, or if there were an administrator with that system, if they wanted to modify the application code itself, they could do so in a way that would basically be able to intercept things that are coming into the server or modify the way that submissions get sent in. So in that scenario, it would no longer be trusted. So with the end-to-end encrypted version of that, once it's available, it would prevent those sorts of attacks. And at that point, we would reconsider being able to deploy on untrusted hardware. But for now, it has to be on trusted hardware within the environment. And so this slide is kind of a tradition with the state of the drop. I had to include it here. What you're seeing on your screen is the very first commit to SecureDrop. This goes back to 2011, and of course the author is Aaron Swartz. So this all just goes to show that the work that we've been doing, everything is building on the foundations that Aaron created.
Yes, Aaron actually finished the prototype in December, the month before he died, and it wasn't really in a form that a lot could be done with. It wasn't a workable prototype. It was hard to get it to run anywhere else and stuff like that. Garrett Robinson and Trevor Tim and a number of other people got it into a good shape. And the rest is kind of history. So really appreciate you coming on, Kevin. Andre, did you have any other questions?
No, that was my only one.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So basically, really important. If you reach out to them, if you want to get set up, they can help you get set up and answer questions. And more importantly, remember, if you do use SecureDrop, it's still best to sort of go to a library computer and do it over Tor. Just to be safe. You never want to do any whistleblowing from your house, from your phone. None of that stuff. And this is where I have to give my whistleblower disclaimer speech, which is just really think about it before you're going to do it. And perhaps talk to an attorney first is actually a good thing to do. It's really easy to get a piece of information that you think is so important. You've got to just make it public right away and everything be damned. But it's really the last thing you want to do. A couple weeks never matters. And you don't want to be like Reality Winner, who gave out some information that everybody already had a couple months later, and she was in jail for 5 years. So it's better to wait, think about it, make sure you have to do it, protect yourself at all costs, because it's really you and your family and everybody you know. You really don't want to be attached to the information. You want to get it to the press to try to get it out. And do you have any advice during this, authoritarian regime that we're sliding into? In terms of, getting it out to the press? We were talking about this a little bit with Brian Shapiro. You can have all the facts in an article, front page of the New York Times, and it may not matter anymore, depending. you know, which means you want to be even more careful about it, because then you're really just throwing yourself under the bus and not necessarily getting the bad guy. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. I mean, it's one of those things where you want to, when you submit something, if you're going to do it, you want to do it in a safe way. So use SecureDrop if at all possible. Like I say, we have a directory where we list organizations that have met at least our security requirements for the landing page. They've met all of the requirements for actually installing SecureDrop. So be sure to use a trusted organization. Like you said, you know, use a device that that you own. Don't use an employer's device. Use a public network like a coffee shop or a library. And, you know, really it comes down to just protect yourself as much as possible. Reach out to trusted organizations. Reach out to a few of them. You know, some check their SecureDrop more than others. Some of them, one organization might be interested in your story, another one might not. But above all, like you say, don't rush it. Continue to use the safest means necessary. Protect yourself. Stay safe out there.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming on and hang out for a little bit if you want. And we really look forward, really happy to have you. Thanks a lot, Nathan.
Thanks again.
All right, great. Well, next we have Tracy Jaquith, who is going to tell us, her talk is called Microservices, Monoliths, and Operational Security at the Internet Archive in 2024. And Tracy, thanks a lot for coming on. What a shit year for attacks on libraries, basically. And I'm really glad that you're gonna kind of let us know a little bit more, kind of the inside scoop as much as you can on the situation. Take it away, Tracy.
Okay, microphone okay? Good.
Sounds great.
Okay, great. Yes, it's been a rough year for the archive. It's been a rough few years actually, but we had a rough year in 2024, which I'll get into a little bit. This talk is called Microservices, Monoliths, and Operational Security. Three things extremely on my mind in the end of 2024 here. And thanks, Aaron Swartz, as always, for being a great place for knowledge and interesting, amazing stuff. You can follow along at tracy.archive.org if you want to see the slides. And they're linkable and stuff. Okay, so I won't bury the lead. We were hacked horribly, as you probably know, in September and October. I'm probably not going to get into a whole lot of details like I'd love to, but I'm sure legal would have a word with me if I did. But more or less, a lot of the things that happened or happened elsewhere are going to be covered by this talk, just to give you a sense of like the sort of bounds of the kinds of things that tends to happen. But yeah, it was a historic year for us after a historic election. This is the first time we've ever taken all of our servers offline, completely off the network. Since 1996, we've never done that before, never even anything close to it. And we've been furiously working, most of us, like pretty around the clock for over a month, trying to get things into better operational security setup and get things back online slowly. So what is operational security? Some of you might be wondering. Probably a good general definition is we're trying to keep systems and servers secure, reliable, and performant. So it's a little bit of SRE, monitoring, DevOps, all the things, but really just making sure that your coders and your operations people are keeping a very close eye on security. So that applies to servers and virtual machines. It applies to clouds, whether you're self-hosting like we tend to do at the archive, or third party like AWS or Azure. Database storage like Postgres or something similar, and how you access it. How do you do your code deploys? What's your process? And how do you handle your data? Because at the archive, for example, we're probably one of the biggest holders of data, I think, in the world. If not, we're very close. So we have a massive amount of data, and we want to protect that like as the #1 thing. So if we think of things as like attack surface, like what are some of the practical examples of what's tends to be exposed. We're still using a bit of PHP, a fair amount of PHP. I would argue too much PHP, but we're still using a fair amount of PHP. And PHP is great because it allows programmers to write code really fast, but it's got some good limits on memory and things like that, but it's got other things that just make it real easy to shoot yourself in the foot. So you want to look at your entry points and all the ways that people are getting into your PHP code from the outside, all of your public endpoints, your database access, like is there public access? If so, how is it limited? Are you running shell commands? Most places do processing of some sort. So how is that all governed or protected? And of course, our friendly, lovely JavaScript cross-site scripting, putting alerts on people's pages and things like that, which is fun. So what kinds of things can you do? Well, you can do some of the obvious ones like get rid of old code, get rid of unnecessary modules, keep up to date, scan and lock down open ports, because that's often a source of leakage. Like, oops, someone can talk to the database. That didn't happen to us. That's not uncommon. You can limit your public access to the APIs, or make sure they're governed, or throttled, or all kinds of things, or managed or monitored. And you probably want to prefer the least possible ways in, so you can centralize your monitoring. So for PHP, a good example would be you want to have strict coding standards and linting. So you don't want your coders to just write code. You want to have robots checking them regularly.
Ooh, what does linting mean?
Oh, linting is like a style guide or style checking. So it's both checking that your code is kind of like what the group has decided it looks like good code, because there's lots of ways to solve the same problem in the same coding language. But it also means you're checking for things like the third point, like you shouldn't be using eval. You should be escaping your shell arguments. So linting can both basically do style, and it can also just check for bad things. So it's like a scanner. Okay. I don't know why they went with like belly button lint, but for the name, but
Oh, okay. Now it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, go on.
Maybe it's for dryers, like lint in your dryers. I don't know.
Yeah.
You want to make sure your code is regularly updated, so don't stay like a version or 2 versions or 3 versions behind, because that's where the support falls off. You can use static analysis tools that kind of goes hand in hand with linting, like something like PHP Scan or Psalm or other kinds of things to scan your code automatically. And then to avoid cross-site scripting, you want to do HTML entities or something similar for user inputs. And here's like my favorite example for cross-site scripting. So let's say we have a web page called welcome, you're welcome to example.com. You just made a page, so we're going to make a little web form and say enter your page title here. So instead of like your title being like Little Bobby's favorite page, your title is script document right. Page is mine, script. And if you don't check for that, or you don't purify it or otherwise, well, they disowned your page now, which doesn't make you look very good. General security, my favorite one is absolutely, if you get one thing out of this talk, I should have put this at the front and the end slide, principle of least privilege. So what you want to do is make sure that if you don't need privs, you don't need access, you don't need tokens, don't have them. Don't have any access to them. Don't have access to the database. So minimize your role-based access control. I'll get into that in a little bit. If anything that's like scary or could be hacked, if it's not needed, don't put it in there. Don't put it in your deployment. So if you can have a static web server that just serves SVGs and JPEGs and HTML chunks and JavaScript pages, great. Like that's almost unhackable. So do that wherever you can, split things up. So like you've got little deployments that are just doing static web servers, and then you've got the more scary things in a more limited and controlled place. We'll get into all that. And of course, you can restrict the network on your deploys, have no database access, all those kinds of things. So you can have, if they're using containers, you can make it so the containers can't talk to the outside world, or they can't even talk to each other. So those are great things about principle of least privilege. If you don't need something, don't do it. So we talked a little bit about injections, but there's SQL injection attacks. So you can use prepared statements, escape your arguments. That's where someone, if you put in a web form, your name is like, select star from, secrets, and that somehow slips in, that could get dumped into the screen and reveal your database table. You want to make sure that any of your data or secrets are encrypted. And that includes the transit, the storage, however they're delivered, just make sure they're encrypted as much as possible. Command line calls, they're great. I mean, you can do all sorts of interesting stuff. You can resize an image, you can, I don't know, you can call out to some other server or service, you can compare pieces of text for similarity. There's lots of great things to do on the command line, but you want to avoid using it as a root user, because if they attack your command line and break out as root, they can own your machine. So you want to, like, if you're taking user uploads, like if you name a file called movie.mp4 ; delete, that's not good. Like if you shell that out on the command line and say, like, I don't know, convert or ffmpeg, and you use that as an argument, you forget to escape it or quote it or similar, you just got owned. So you want to do things like escape shell arg and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, anytime you can use predefined scripts, like PHP has like chmod and chown and makedir and all that kind of stuff, that's way better than shelling out and doing like, backtick or running some kind of thing that does makedir or whatever. Use the built-ins wherever you can. Every language has them. Secrets management. So one of the biggest things is secrets and tokens. You've got your AWS tokens, maybe your database tokens, your user secrets or cookies, or any of those kinds of things. Like all that stuff has to be secure, and you want to have it outside of your code repos. You want to have it outside of your deploys. You want to have it outside of your containers as much as possible. And if you're going to inject it, we'll get into that. There's ways to do that. Yeah. You don't want your .git subdirectory. So I'm sorry, and you can also use like third-party things like HashiCorp Vault, which is probably industry standard, AWS Secrets Manager. You don't want your Git subdir to go into your deployment, because any sins, like you accidentally committed a token, well, that's in your Git history. And if someone gets a hold of your .git subdir, they've got your Git history, and they can go back through time and search it and find all the prior bad practices or things that you fixed. So don't do that. You want to use environment variables or dedicated storage, like some secure vault that you retrieve secrets on the fly. Environment variables are a good option that makes developers a little easier for developers, where they don't start doing maybe less lax or more lax practices. And most of the orchestration tools like Kubernetes or Nomad from HashiCorp have automatic secrets management, so just lean into those, and they'll inject environment variable secrets into the container at runtime. And why that's important is your secrets never wind up in your Docker image or your registry. They only wind up in the container when it fires up, and it's done sort of on demand. Another big one is just, if you've got an open network or open machines, strongly think about a virtual private network, a VPN. So that means only people who are in the VPN or have the credentials, the login, can get to your machines or get to the machines that have any kind of control plane or ability to do or administer things. Those should all be locked down. You want to use two-factor authentication, which most people have experience with for logins, but probably a lot less people have familiarity with passkeys. Passkeys are awesome. They're kind of like SSH keys. If SSH keys and all the advantages of SSH keys with a public and private key, and passwords had a baby. So see that? Passwords plus SSH keys, passkeys. Passkeys are awesome. So they're site-by-site basis. They go right back to your phone or your secure device, and or your watch. So you have biometrics tied in. So if I log into Amazon, I can use a passkey, and I just look at my phone, boom, I'm in. So there's no password, there's no type in, there's no password managed. It's just through this passkey setup. And that means you can't be phished or spear phished, which is when they really want your credentials. So passkeys are great for that, because phishing is a big thing. All right, getting back to role-based access control, RBAC. That again is using the principle of least privilege. So a good example is if you're going to have a deploy of, say, a container that was just built, instead of it having God access to your deployment system, where it could potentially bring up or bring down things, or it could do administrative things, just have it be able to do read access to your container registry. So that's the only thing it can do, and probably an injection of a new job to your deploy system. So you can start limiting and locking down little things. And the great thing is you can combine them. So you can have two things, like one thing can only do a read, one thing can only do a write, and they can together. You can't do a read write. You know, you've got a handoff securely. And you can also have groups of people with limited deploy tokens or other limited tokens, so they can't access or, you know, control all of your deployment setup, but they can do maybe just a subset or only a subset of operations to a subset of deploys. Network security, firewall rules, that's kind of obvious. You probably want that for sure. Nginx has a web application firewall, which is quite nice, and has a lot of good defaults. I'll just say it's definitely worth looking into. You want to consider like the zero trust architecture. So you just assume that any internal or external thing, you just don't trust wherever it's going, and then you sort of build from there. So you don't trust by default, you distrust by default, and then you add things as needed. Like maybe you want to allow someone to clone from GitHub, or maybe you don't. You know, it depends on what that thing is doing and what your risk or tolerance is. Or maybe you only allow cloning from certain GitHub repos from certain groups, things like that. Generally speaking, I would say assume your private code might leak. And there's just a good way, you know, it's kind of like all the crap on our computers. Just assume there's a decent chance someone's going to phish you. Hopefully not, but like try not to have like really awful things on in your deploys or on your machines, because if someone really wants it and you're high value, they're probably going to eventually get it. So, you know, watch your mouth in communications, watch your mouth in coding, code defensively, like your organization depends on it, because at some point it might. And make sure your secrets and tokens are stored elsewhere and never in your code repos.
Can I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
It's easy to see how a big organization like the Internet Archive can be a target, but what would you say that the normal user or the small organizations should be like preparing for these things? Is more likely to be in like a more like a more, sorry, my English just failed.
That's fine.
It's easier to be a more like lucrative target, or a more like in evidence if you're like doing this kind of activism. But this should be a worry for any kind of organization or any kind of user.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're doing like a small project that's, you know, like a side thing, or it's interesting, you know, like again, you can try to limit it to just client-side JavaScript and static file servers. Maybe it's using APIs elsewhere, right? You can start with that kind of a thing and just be an army of one. But as you start building up more and more people or more and more interesting projects, you become generally higher and higher value, right? To own or take over, your reputation increases, right? So one of the reasons the archive is such a hotspot for or an interesting target isn't so much that we're a library, although, you know, there are people who like burning books in libraries, but generally speaking, it's because we have a very high reputation. We're a top 200 website. We have pretty much since the start. We're also an incredibly long-lived website. We predate YouTube, GitHub, or sorry, not Git, but GitHub, GitLab, like everything pretty much, except for like, you know, Alta Vista and MSN.com and Yahoo. So that makes you, if they can hack your server or hack an item or hack your website, right, or hack a review, right, that gives clout to the search engines typically. I mean, you can mitigate, but it's always this cat and mouse. So you become much more interesting. Now, the good thing is, the more interesting you become, generally the more resources you have, you build in bigger teams. So it's kind of like this always upwardly, you know, moving cat and mouse kind of thing. And of course, if, you know, there are people who just, you know, want you bad enough that they'll just throw like DEF CON at you or something, you know, and just, you know, that's just going to be very hard to mitigate against, like the military, right? I mean, that's.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, a state level, you know, a state level actor kind of thing. But like you mentioned before, a lot of this is phishing. A lot of this is just throwing a lot out there and seeing who clicks, you know, seeing who clicks on the links or running tests on going to your website and trying different things just to see if anything does anything or whatever. And they will make these scripts where they're stringing hundreds of things together and then just let them loose on something to see. So it's a free pen test, as we say. Yeah. So it pays to be, you basically you want to be in lockdown and then open up for the things you need, which is harder than it sounds for a non-technical person. Like, what does lockdown mean? Oh, use a VPN or make sure I have a firewall, or, you know, the simple things. And it's mainly when you're, just to be clear, it's mainly when you're in charge of data for other people, whether they are the members of your organization or the other people in your organization, that you actually have data now that you wish to protect. And so a whole other thing, and that's really when you probably need to hire a security expert to help you do that right, because you basically do it right, or you might, it's just going to be an open door to anybody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and I can't say how valuable it is to go to conferences and to talk to security experts and other people and other consultancies and engage them as well, because they will give you a less myopic vision of what is going on or what to look at. They'll try other tools, they'll try other pen tests, they'll try to, you know, hack you and give you a report. That kind of stuff is super invaluable, because, you know, as much as an organization knows, that's good, but you know, there's always things that we don't know, or there's new things coming, and having people where that's their job. Like my older brother's a security expert and writes books on it, so he's constantly engaging with like different companies and running their security and stuff. So, and
it's a moving target, is another important point. It's just always moving. But the thing I love about the security community is when you're finally ready to pay attention and try to figure it out, they are really there for you to teach you, you know, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I really encourage people to, if you've decided that, you know, okay, I'm ready to try to learn this stuff, you know, you really can. There's a lot of tutorials out. And when you have that question that doesn't seem to be answered, write the person and ask them. And I'd say there's like a 90% chance that they're going to write you back and answer your question, because they want more people to understand this stuff, and to, you know, the more people in the community that are doing more things and adding to it. And sometimes it's the non-technical people that come up with the use cases, a new use case in whatever they're trying to do. And so it's helpful to the security community too, to be getting feedback from the non-technical places and stuff like that. So you're part of the security community, whether you realize it or not, is what I'm trying to say. Especially if they put out a fix for something and the fix says, hey, we fixed this, and then you do it and it's not fixed. You don't know about the technical parts of why it's not fixed, but your information just, yeah, you said it fixed and it's not fixed, is incredibly valuable, right? Because they think it's fixed and you can never get enough QA. So that's my little speech. As someone who just started paying attention a few years ago and still couldn't even call myself a security, anything else but a novice, but I understand more. And as you start learning, you know how to ask the right questions. At least it starts like a threat model. I didn't even know what a threat model was. And all the security articles would start with the threat model. A threat model is just your situation and all the ins and outs of your situation and all the different ways that somebody maybe could get you, kind of thing. But I was just not reading any of the articles because they started off with this threat model thing. And I was like, what's up with the threat model? So, you know, don't feel bad wherever you start. Don't feel bad.
Yeah,
Take it away.
and don't sell yourself short, Lisa. You've been doing security stuff and secure kinds of things for I'd say 5-10 years now. So, but anyway, yeah.
And I'm still a novice. Go back, go on.
Yeah. So yeah, as a good example too, sort of related to all this, like I'm an Apple fangirl, and I love when Apple comes out with a new thing like, you know, the Secure Enclave or whatever. And so they'll actually put out the hardware model, and they'll basically say, hack it, like try to break it, and give us reports and put out bounties, like security bounties. So that's like a super cool thing, sort of, you know, try to make sure that when you get through that kind of thing, you can tell people like, this is a secure way to do, you know, transactions or identity or other kinds of things, because it's been battle tested. Okay, so the next thing is logging and monitoring. So we've talked a bit about security and how, generally speaking, how to do a bunch of different kinds of things. Really good next step would be, or maybe not next step, but a step in tandem, is try to make sure you have comprehensive logging. And so anything, especially anything that's interesting, like maybe writes or changes to your system, login attempts, anything like that, or any kind of weird looking URL, you'd love to have that logged somewhere that can be found by a robot or a person, probably a robot, or searched with a search engine. And then you can ideally start setting up alerts. So if someone starts writing URLs with /Etsy/password in them, you know, you're like, okay, some jackass is running a little script kiddie at us, and you can at least start looking, and you know, that, who cares? Like, no, I mean, sorry, if you get that file lifted, that's on you. But generally speaking, like that's like part of the 500 URLs they're going to try to go hit, and like try to pull in like a .aws credentials file or other kinds of stupid things, you know, that you may or may not be doing. So always good to just see who's probing your perimeters.
It's nice to see if things are working too.
Yeah,
it's basically somebody tried to do this.
Yeah.
You know.
So hopefully it's all 404s and 403s and, you know, piss off, you know.
Yes.
Responsive. And you can verify that. So you want to centralize your logging and have all the monitoring and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more on like the coding world, or how you can break up code and systems. I like to think about things in terms of clouds, CI/CD, which we'll get into, and GitOps, which we'll also get into. Well, GitOps we get into right here. So typically a dev will make some code changes. They'll make a commit and a push to some repo. It could be public or private, could be self-hosted, GitLab.com, GitHub.com, wherever. Bitbucket, I don't know. Oh, there's tons more. So the new way of doing things is what they call continuous integration and continuous deployment, or CI/CD. So once that commit hits, you automatically rebuild any related containers, usually one, but it could be more, from, you know, not typically, but, well, depends. Often a Docker file, but it could be some other instructions like Heroku or otherwise. But there's usually something that builds from your code. And now you can make sure the build happens, and you can make sure that that build is tested as well as the code. So here's where you could lint your code. Here's where you could do security checks on your code. But now here's where you could do unit tests and even integration tests on that container that's about to go out the door. When I say container, I mean, if you're new to containers, it's like where all of your code and dependencies live in one, like, kind of file that can be
like a Docker container.
A Docker container, which is kind of like a file with a manifest of layers, but you could think of it like a file that gets passed around to servers. And then you go into continuous deployment, which is exactly what I was just sort of saying. So now you're redeploying to a cloud that rebuilt image or images. Typically, they should have automatic health checking, so they'll do some probing before it actually goes live and sort of say, like, is it passing health checks? And if so, it'll automatically promote it, move traffic to it, and then cut the traffic from the old servers and roll those out. If there's any kind of issues, it will roll them back automatically. So that's really nice. And you can also typically roll back one version if you needed to. You're like, oh shit, we didn't catch something in health checking, but something's not doing right. Let's just automatically roll back one version. So those are great things that all of the clouds and systems offer. So they refer to it as GitOps because as a dev, once you have the system set up, you don't really have to think about it. You change some code, you make your commit, and you make your push, and you're good. It's like, you know, 5 minutes later, an hour later, depending on your tests and stuff, your code's live. It's really lovely, and it's a nice pattern. So now you can just do this like in all sorts of different repositories because you know exactly how your code is going out there. You can also do automation of security operations. So you can do static code analysis. So it can look at your code and just look for things that look bad or fishy or known bad patterns. You can scan for known secrets or tokens or S3 access key or secret key patterns and things like that. Those are easy to scan for. Might as well have a job for that. You can do dependency scanning. So look at all your third-party modules, just make sure they're up to date, they don't have any issues, and give warnings in your jobs or even emails or other alerting that you need to update your package because it has a critical issue. And then you can do different kinds of things where you can have like either playbooks or a certain script that runs if something's happening. Like maybe you're getting a denial of service attack and you start looking through IPs for very certain patterns that's automatically block them. That's a good example. But you want to have different ways to kind of go after attackers ready to go. Secrets and tokens. So GitHub Actions and GitLab have very easy ways to put secrets and tokens into individual repositories or groups of repositories. You can take your pick. And it's really as easy as this. Below this happens to be GitLab, but you can go find your settings in your repository or your group, and then go into the CI/CD and enter a variable, and you can mark it as a secret. And now this 33, I put a secret live, is going to be wind up in your deployment as Nomad secret X, or probably the environment variable might be called X. The X is 33. I'm sure it meant something at the time. But
did you broadcast a secret on the live demo, Tracy?
Totally did. I'm in
Bad
trouble.
Tracy.
Bad Tracy. And one really nice thing is this is all kind of GUI based, and this is on GitLab or GitHub, and so devs can just self-administer. It makes it nice and easy. You want it to be easy enough for your devs, because if it's not easy enough, they won't do it. You don't want that. So these automatically flow into your deployments as environment variables, which is super nice. It also means you can rotate or change your secrets anytime. You can just go to the same page and change them, and the new one goes in. Easy peasy. You can even do like automatic rotations where they change every month or every 6 months. That's a good idea with some plugins and things like that. Your secrets could then be easily audited. You know where they are. You're not worried or wondering where they are. And again, you're limiting them based on repository or microservice. So if it doesn't need a secret, it gets no secrets. If it needs one secret, it has one secret. You don't give it lots of secrets. You want to have regular backups, and you want to check your regular backups. You want to do little drills and things like that. That's pretty obvious. You can use checksums for your data. That's a really good thing, and timestamps. And you can even use blockchains of file names with checksums and modification times and things like that. And you can do them Merkle root and all that kind of stuff. So that's a great way to verify the security of your data. You want your database and data backups. So in our case, it could just be user files or employee uploaded files, but you might want to consider a non-public data backup, so that one can't easily be gotten to. That's usually a good idea if you can do that. Sometimes that's a money thing or whatever, but think about that. Avoid monoliths. Monoliths suck.
Monoliths.
They're cool because like you've got this one thing and everyone knows how to use it. Great, but they tend to accrete secrets, bad practices, code, junk, vulnerabilities, third-party crap, older packages and setups over time, and then they just start impacting, and like tangling. So someone's like, oh, can we finally pull Python 2 out of here or whatever, PHP version 3? You're like, I don't know, because like there's this other thing and it's kind of you're like, oh no, like we shouldn't have ever have done this. We should have just had two separate things. The new code would be PHP 8 and the old code is PHP 5 or whatever, and you move on with your life.
So what's some examples of a monolith to not use?
A monolith is like, let's say you've got like multiple websites and multiple servers and multiple VMs, and maybe you've got 20,000 files and 20 years of Git history, right? Like any of those kinds of things, or all of those things, can make a massive repository, a code repository. And if someone gets,
so there's just no data hygiene whatsoever. It's not a question of using something like Visual Basic. It's not a question of using something bad to begin with that will give you these things like Visual Basic or something. You know, the 2000s was like the sad decade of everyone finding out that everything they did in Visual Basic was crap. Everything they spent all their time on was insecure because they just use the defaults for everything.
Right. Yeah. It's that kind of stuff. It's if the bigger the repository and the longer history it is, the more likely it has, you know, maybe it's got like Python and PHP and JavaScript and Go and Rust and all these different things thrown in, and, you know,
integrated in a way that isn't easy to replace components.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And much harder to, like, you can bring a new person in, they're like, what? I don't like, it's going to take me weeks to even understand the basics of this thing. Whereas if you've got a microservice, it's like, oh, okay, this thing deals with your login system. Okay. It kind of makes sense. And it's in one language and it's up to date and it's checked and so on and so forth. You can also share your CI practices across the microservices. So it doesn't feel like you've got to start over, right? Like it's sort of like, no, you're just writing code. You've got your Docker file and it has all the other benefits and secrets managements and other things that all the other microservices and repos have. Just makes it a lot smaller to figure things out. And I'll get more into that in a second.
And it's easier for you too, not just for the person you might hand it off to someday.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you know, I always say, like, what's a good system design? Like, you know, and people have different answers. My answer is like, you know, sort of like, does it fit on a piece of paper? No, it's a bad design. Like, no, like, it should be simple and straightforward to understand. Sure, there can be complexity, but if you can't make a diagram to explain it on one sheet of paper, it's too complicated already. So break it up. Break up the bell system for the oldsters in the audience.
It's a good test too, to see if you actually know your own system.
Yeah.
If you get pushback, if somebody asks for a diagram and they give you pushback, it's always a bad sign.
Yeah.
You know, because they're like, oh, you don't have a diagram already bad sign. You can't draw one quickly, because I'd be the person asking the question that nobody wanted to answer. And I, because of, you know, because like I said, I'm a novice in a lot of these areas, I would have my little diagram because I'm trying to figure it out, you know. And then the people would argue about the diagram that work there every day. And then where are you going to go forward in that, you know, in that situation? If your little server, you know how you have the little servers and just like, what direction is the data going? Like a really simple diagram like that. And they can't do it because they really only know their area.
Yep.
And they haven't actually thought about the whole system. And which is another trap, because of course your area is better if you think about the whole system and stuff. So yeah, I was learning a lot more about what not to do for a while in the 2000s, trying to reel back, because it was so easy, because people just wanted to get it up and running, like email servers. They just deployed everything easier. And this is actually the difficulty in installing and configuring an email server, for instance, is what got us in this situation with Gmail, because it was so hard to do and Google made it so easy. But now you're trapped on Google, and there still isn't really an easy alternative for installing an email server. So yeah, it's just it's good to think about the whole system. I was just trying to give some examples. I didn't mean to give so many. Carry on.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. So microservices are good because generally they're one-to-one with a repo. And just think about it, right? Like if it's got like one fairly comprehensive thing that it does, chances are there's probably a few coders who are familiar with it, and they might know every line of code and every commit and every part of that system. So you can cross-check each other. Once you get into a big monolith, there's no one who knows every single line, or there's no one who's like, you know, and sometimes that's a bad thing for creativity, but generally it's a good thing. Like, it's generally a good thing to have someone or multiple people who are kind of like, they really understand all the nuts and bolts of one area, and maybe multiple areas, but they're not thrown into this huge like thing that's just a big monster. So some good examples. Like, we don't necessarily do all of these or any of these at the archive per se. I'm being I'm being silent on that, but some examples might be, maybe you have one deploy that just deals with your login system and your users, right? That seems like a relatively good thing. If they want to change their names or passwords or whatever, you've got it in one place, or mint keys or any of those kinds of things. You've got one place that does it, and you've got a certain security and set of eyes on that, and a way to think about and be concerned about that one specific microservice. You could have one for just metadata, and maybe it's read-only metadata, maybe it's read-write metadata. But you could have APIs that are based through it, and that you can have either internal and external access to it. That's another good way that you could think about a microservice. Maybe you've got some data processing you need to do, like resize an image or scan or scale or crop it or whatever. Instead of throwing it in a mono repo or a monolith, throw it in a small little service, right? Like it does one thing well, and maybe it's got a bunch of tools and exotic things that, like Gifsicle or otherwise, right? So it's like, okay, put all that crap there. So like, why would you have image processing tools with your login system, right? That they shouldn't really be together, because they have nothing to do with each other, and now you're just opening up yourself to code and systems. Yeah, so the other thing is, you can, with each microservice, right, you can evaluate and go right back to that principle of least privilege. So if you don't need the database, or maybe you don't even have to talk in or out to the network, make that be opt-in, make it no be the default, and only if you need it do you add it. You can have the minimal and zero secrets or tokens. There's no need to put all your secrets in all of your microservices. That would be horrible. So don't do that. You can keep your microservices completely cut off from your data storage or your data or whatever is going on, depending on the microservice. And you can make your web servers be 100% read-only, or other kinds of restrictions. Again, network going outbound maybe is restricted. So that makes each piece of your puzzle be more and more secure and have less things that can go wrong or be hacked. Houses versus farms. I always hated the pets versus cattle thing, because I'm not exactly a vegetarian, but like, I don't think cattle should be like, anyway. So let's think about things in terms of houses or farms. So pets or houses, that's fine. And maybe those are self-managed or custom virtual machines or bare metal. That's fine. No real issue there. But if you've got scalable systems or farms, that can be a system or microservice that can be easily rebooted or moved or migrated or upgraded, replaced or scaled up or down. That's really good to have as a microservice, and it's in a container or in a cloud, because it doesn't really matter if it goes up or down in the middle of the night. You've got a bunch of more farms that automatically pop up if or as needed. So that's a really nice thing to do. Generally speaking, stay up to date. You got to monitor and audit your security. You got to look for CVEs, common vulnerabilities and exposures, and have people on those kinds of lists or things like that. Drop unsupported operating system software languages. For example, Python 2, like it's something like 10 years out of date. Like if you have it in your system, get rid of it and upgrade. So conclusions, large complex systems increase operational security concerns and issues and risk. So one good alternative is embrace containers, clouds, and orchestration. And what I have found as we started looking into these at the archive, these clouds and container systems, is I thought like, oh, what we've done at the archive is it's so niche, and it's so like pet, and it's so like it's so precious, right? Like we could never just go to someone else's system. That wouldn't make any sense. But it turns out all of it's been solved before. Like you think you've got this complex thing, or maybe it's got like, it needs a database and a back end and a front end and a mid end and whatever. I'm like, that's fine. Like all the systems can do that. They can do multiple container deploys. They've got ways to talk to each other securely. They've got secrets. Like everything that you think is special about your organization, your code, or your system. Everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's got the same problems. Everyone's got the same operational security. So leverage what's already out there. Learn by what they've done. Do your slight adaptations to move it to that systems, and you will be paid 10x or whatever. I don't know what the right analogy is, but you will be paid well for those kinds of movements. Yeah, and just go to conferences, talk to people, stay up, do all the best practices, and have a cat if you. All right. Thanks, everybody.
The famous cat. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andre, did you have any questions?
No.
Okay. So thank you so much for coming on and explaining all that. It's really great. I feel very privileged to have you come on every year, and especially this particular talk about what you learned, because everyone is wondering, you know, what exactly happened and how you were able to fix it. And it's really nice to be like, here's what we do, you know? So thank you very much.
Yeah, what I will close with is multiple things that were talked about in this talk happened to us. I'll just say that.
It was basic security stuff, right?
Relatively basic security stuff, or meaning, you know, yeah, there are ways that you miss things, and there were some things we missed, and we have much better practices now. Lessons learned.
Lessons learned. All right. Well, thanks for coming on and clearing it all up. Tracy, just remove your background. It's going to be too weird to bye. Thanks other Tracy, not to be confused. Tracy 1 and Tracy 2. Thanks a lot, Tracy Internet Archive, for coming on. I really appreciate it. All right. And then Tracy, Oakland Privacy, and Aaron Swartz Day. Go ahead and turn your background off.
Really?
Yeah, it's too weird.
Is it like glimmering some weird way? I'm sorry. I think it's
it looks, the tree is basically coming out of your head, and you're just a face on the tree.
Oh,
so it would be too hard to pay attention to anything you're saying. Yeah, all Tracy, right, feel free to hang out, other Tracy, if you want. It's perfectly fine. And then yeah, Tracy, go ahead and didn't turn your camera off. I just said turn your background off, not your camera.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So do you know how to do that?
I do.
Just
give me a
go
second
into
here.
Settings.
Yep. I'm here.
Virtual background. Okay, cool. Yeah, because otherwise, there we go. Because otherwise, we can't see you.
Right.
Okay, great. So everybody, welcome Tracy Rosenberg. Yay!
Welcome.
I'm so glad to have you on.
It's like there's a little side blackness I don't quite get, but all right.
You're not going to be able to fix it. Don't worry about it.
All right.
So I'm having you on to let us know about some of the things that have been happening this last year and what we might do to prepare for the coming years. What are your thoughts, Tracy?
Yeah, totally. So first, hi, everyone. I'm Tracy with Oakland Privacy. We are statewide advocates for safeguards and guardrails in the interests of privacy protection, civil rights, and community consent. And we focus a lot on surveillance equipment as used by the government to watch you. So what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about sort of pre-November 5th, what the consensus was about kind of how we all do this work. And the word consensus is like a dangerous word because it's not like everybody always agrees on everything anyway, but sort of the general broad consensus. And then a little bit about what changed on Tuesday and how we're going to have to start thinking kind of going forward. And I didn't bring slides. So you will all have a slide break.
Yeah, no problem.
Which is needed periodically. But when we talk about sort of what the consensus was before Tuesday, I think it basically focused on sort of three kind of rails or three, like a three-sided triangle. The first, and those three things were public records, digital security, which you've heard quite a bit about, and transparency and consent frameworks. And I'll briefly just talk about all three of those things. So public records is, the act of telling the government to give you the information you're entitled to have that they haven't given it to you. And when you're talking about surveillance equipment, what they have and how they're using it is one of those large areas where the information that you do have is extremely different from the information that you should have. So the Aaron Swartz Day Surveillance Project, the Atlas of Surveillance run out of the University of Nevada, Reno, and a bunch of other entities have gone around filing lots of public records to kind of tell us, okay, what have they got? What kind of equipment? How are they deploying it? How are they using it? What are they writing grants to buy? What's coming down the kind of down the pike? So public records is kind of the first leg of the triangle, like what's going on? What don't we know that we need to know? The second leg of the triangle is obviously digital security. What can we do as people to make sure they have as little of our information as possible? And digital security is a big subject here at Aaron Swartz Day. Everybody talks about it all the time. So I'll kind of leave it there. But obviously, VPNs, firewalls, encryption, all of these things are kind of tools that we can use to protect our privacy. And lastly, there's what we call transparency and consent frameworks, which would otherwise sort of commonly be called regulation. And what that basically means is that we try to set up laws or ordinances or some kind of binding requirement on bodies that watch us, that basically they have to have rules of the road. They have to have guidelines. They have to tell us how they're going to use it, what they're going to use it for, and what they're not going to use it for. There has to be some kind of oversight from a governing body. There has to be some kind of reporting back. And all of this needs to happen in public, not hidden in private. So we call it transparency and consent, the idea being in a broad sense, idealistically, that there's some level of public consent to the kind of surveilling that's happening. So that was kind of what the broad consensus was for how we do this work. So a three-way rail of public records, digital security training for people and organizations, and transparency and consent frameworks. So then Tuesday happened, and it sort of became like, okay, all of this is going to get, what's the word, turned over on us, and we're going to see a complete weaponization of all of these systems. And all of these efforts, which to some degree are partial, yes, we filed public records, but not all the public records that needed to be filed. Yes, there have been digital security trainings, but not everybody's had them that needs to have them. And not everybody takes full advantage of all of the things that they learn in these trainings. And transparency and consent frameworks probably for every place where they've been put into place, at least partially, there's 10 more places where they haven't. It was work in process. And that's not going to be good enough going forward. So I don't have any magic bullets for you, because we're grappling with it like everybody's grappling with it, right? Like, what are the things that we have to do at this point in time? But I just thought I would share a couple of...
Right. So for the Aaron Swartz Day Police Surveillance Project and the work we've been doing, and what I basically did, everybody, just to give you a little background, was when I met Tracy, because I had her at the event as a speaker, and I learned about what she was doing with Oakland Privacy, piling public records requests, where you're basically, there's a list of surveillance equipment, and you're writing separate letters, because you get a response faster with a separate letter, asking about these individual pieces of equipment, things like stingrays, license plate readers, infrared cameras. We have a whole list of it on the website and everything that we send letters, and we're going to have to add to that list. Tell us a little bit about the developments in the killer robot sphere.
Okay. So what I was moving my way towards is, so what has to be different, right? Because we're in a different situation, at least for a couple of years, and maybe for longer than that. So when we're looking at some of this equipment has to be banned. That's what it comes down to. You can't regulate and control every possible surveillance technology. We've tried, but we're getting to the point where our opponents are going to be weaponizing these things to such an extent that essentially there's not going to be any other way to stop them. So when we look at things that have to be banned, one of the things that sort of jumps up there is what we jokingly call killer robots.
I'm not joking when I say it. These are actual killer robots. These are robots that can kill you. I don't see the joke. Yeah.
Okay. What we're talking about in jargon land, unmanned vehicles, both aerial, in which case they're flying drones, and non-aerial, in which case they're earthbound robots that have weapons on them. These weapons can include assault rifles. They can include grenades. They can include missiles, or what we call, air-based weapons. So you basically have something that is controlled remotely that can kill you, that can attack you with a weapon.
And we're not always talking about weapons that have been, this whole idea of what are they going to do? Just strap a bomb on a robot and stick it in the building? Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. That's what we had to regulate against in San Francisco.
So last year, pre-Trump, or pre-Trump 2, if you want to call it, there was actually a bill in the California state legislature to ban what we call weaponized robots and weaponized drones. It was a fight, but it got all the way to the governor's desk. And the governor then said, I'm not vetoing it. I'm not banning these things because I believe, God help him, he said this, that there are beneficial uses to this technology.
No, it was actually that it passed and he did veto it.
Yes, he
right?
vetoed.
Okay,
yes.
To be clear. Okay.
And what he said is there are beneficial uses of this technology. He didn't tell us what the beneficial uses are that he was thinking of. He just told us that there were some. Which points to the fact that if this had happened this week, and he was looking at that bill in a post-Trump universe, he probably would have signed it. So we have a shift that likely will happen, that will have to continue happening, where things that we thought were regulatable will all of a sudden begin to appear as the actual threat that they are, because they're going to be weaponized. And we won't be able to control the use of this equipment to uses that we think, or some of us think, are beneficial. It's not going to be up to us how it's used. So in terms of technology like that, we don't actually have to do public records. We kind of know how it's being used. When we look at robots, when we look at drones without guns, what we hear about is things like barricaded suspects, lone gunmen in buildings. What we actually find when we open up the logs is crowd control, protests, pride parades, Cinco de Mayo, trailing cars along the highway. We don't find in any large quantity barricaded suspects. We don't find in any large quantity sole gunmen. We occasionally find some drug deals, but mostly what we find is the control of people in large public spaces. So we have to understand, when we add weapons to this picture, we're basically looking at protesting underneath a weapon in the sky. We are basically looking at the loss of autonomy in public space when we're doing something that the government doesn't like. So these kinds of pieces of equipment that are potentially so powerful, and another one, obviously, that we always talk about is facial recognition, which essentially identifies you in public. So you are no longer anonymous doing your groceries, getting the milk, going to the florist. Potentially you are identified at every moment that you are out in public if someone chooses to. These kinds of technologies, we're going to have to stop thinking so much about regulating them and their beneficial uses and start thinking about banning them. Secondly, we have to take a look at protecting data and data banks, because there's a huge amount of data collected, lots of it by the government, because there's been this rush for 10 years for what they call data-driven decision-making. In government, and in order to do that, you have to collect a whole bunch of crap, right, to document why you want to do this, that, or the other thing. And secondly, there's a whole bunch collected by private companies, or what we call untrustworthy private parties, who will sell it to the government so they don't have to collect it themselves. And in terms of that data, the process of sort of protecting it from rogue elements in the federal government may become increasingly difficult. We're in better shape in California than in lots of states, because we have a lot of laws that talk about data sharing between the state and the feds. Yeah. But the reality is that a lot of those laws are state laws, and they may not stand up to a full-on attack from the federal government.
Right. So this is why we need federal privacy laws.
Well, yes.
Data privacy laws.
There you go.
Not going to happen anytime soon.
No, if there was any chance that was going to happen, it's now gone. But the problem is that these state laws might not stand up if the federal government takes them on, right? So while we have a state privacy framework, which, you know, is not as strong as it could be, but it's here. We don't know if it's going to stand up if the Department of Justice basically says, let us in to this database or that state database. We want to get there. And there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. For example, the automated license plate reader databases. Feds want into them, they can probably get into them. The state law is probably not going to stop them. So within our own sort of control, we have to start thinking about, number one, how can we give less data to the government? And secondly, how can we work with whatever parts of government are not insane at the moment, like state and local governments, to limit the amount of data that they're holding that potentially the feds can get into? In other words, if you don't have it, you can't give it to them. They can't take it because there's nothing there, which is exactly the opposite of what government wants to do and has been doing for the past 10 years, but might be something that we can convince them at this time that if you don't collect it, Trump can't get it. If you don't keep it for years and years and years, then the sharing of it is much less damaging than if you have years and years and years of data. So the collecting and the keeping is what potentially provides the exposure and the danger. So let's collect less and let's keep less. And going forward, if and when we are ever rid of Trump, and if and when this is not the end of the world, we'll have to see. We'll have better privacy practices going forward as a very, very tiny silver lining out of whatever hell is kind of coming for us in the next couple of years. So let me kind of stop there, Lisa. Those are just a couple of kind of early thoughts about the kinds of things that we should be thinking about. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of years.
Yes. Again, it's as an archivist, of course, I'm just trying to track it all. But it sounds like that there's basically, since there aren't any laws to stop companies from collecting whatever data they want and keeping it as long as they want and selling it to whoever they want.
Pretty much.
That's probably only going to get worse. And it gets to be about, you know, like you were saying, what data you want to give to begin with, kind of thing. But when it's the government, it's usually something you don't have any choice over, like your tax form or, you know, whatever you are interacting with the government for. They're usually giving you a form and you got to fill it out, and that's just it. You know,
well, it's not just taxes. You know, there's a lot of health information. There's a lot of medical information.
Right. I'm saying anything.
Information.
Yeah.
And the question of sort of being able to protect that and make sure that it's used for the purpose intended, which is kind of the basic sort of privacy first constitutional thing. Use it for the purpose it's intended. Well, we're not going to be able to do that. And so do we really want to hang on to it in the quantities that we have been, when it's going to be used in ways that nobody anticipated and that nobody wants?
Right. But I mean, how do you make them get rid of it? There's no law making them get rid of it if there's no penalties for when they get hacked constantly.
Well, there's no law yet, but you can certainly go up there and you can talk to them and you say, look, if you can't protect this, then you need to not collect this. Or if you can't protect this, then cut your archiving time from, 3 years to 6 months.
How would you even know with a private company, though?
I'm not talking about private companies. I'm talking about various
government agencies. Okay.
Right. You can tell them to sort of change what they're doing because this is an emergency. Change what you're doing because this is not normal, right? When it comes to private companies, I mean, it's all about not selling it, right? Or who they're selling it to. And I mean, certainly, at least in some cases, there's a customer is always right kind of thing. that certainly some companies can be pressured, like, are you selling it? Who to? If you don't do that, I'm not buying any more widgets. I mean, certainly people can look at those kinds of campaigns, at least in kind of targeted ways.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, the information is secondhand and thirdhand, and that's where the data broker universe that we've all talked about, right, becomes so potentially dangerous, because it's not a firsthand relationship with you that hypothetically at least you have some control over. It's a second hand or a third hand or a fourth hand or an eighth hand relationship, and that company doesn't give a
Uh-oh.
I think she froze.
Oh, no, she froze. Oh, there you are. You're back. Okay, say that again.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry. I got a little the connections off.
No problem.
Oh, shit. No.
Uh-oh, she's gone. Playing. Let's see if there she is.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Okay, take it away.
Okay, so I was talking about the data broker universe. We've all, heard about it. Data brokers are awful. We all hate them.
Yeah.
But the reality is, that whatever control you hold as a customer is with the actual company that you're doing business with. You don't have any control over data brokers because it's second hand, third hand, fourth hand, fifth hand, eighth hand, right? They just bought it from someone. They don't know you from Adam. There's no relationship. They don't care. So the data broker universe becomes where that sort of data in private hands becomes kind of lethal, because it's just owned by some entity that doesn't respond to consumer pressure, doesn't know who you are, doesn't care, and is just looking for how much money they can make on this stuff that they have. And the reality is the federal government, if they want it, is going to pay more than anybody else is going to pay. So the data broker universe becomes an enormously sort of lethal part of this sort of landscape that we're facing, because, trying to break into local government and state government databases is, a lot more work than going out if you can get the same stuff from a data broker that where it's just a question of how much, write a check. That's what they're going to do. So the fact that we've sort of let this data broker landscape sort of spring up and exist pretty much unregulated in every way, and just kind of grow and grow and grow like a bad fungus, is probably going to come back to haunt us now. Because there's regulation of these folks that I'm aware of is in Vermont and California, they have to register and put themselves in a database. That's it.
Okay, that was my next question. So there's really nothing in place now at all in terms of penalties for getting hacked. If you are hacked repeatedly, and again, they're not set up to judge even as far as did the person do anything in good faith to try to secure the data or not. You never even see those kinds of questions. It's just, and I started counting, I got 3 data breaches in the last 2 weeks that all happened in the summer, right? So that's the other thing. They don't tell you till 6 months later that it's even happened.
Right.
The damage has been done, and all they do is tell you to contact your credit bureau.
Which is not what the problem is. I mean, yes, identity theft is kind of terrible.
It's too late anyway. It's been 6 months. If they're going to do it, they've already done it.
And the information is on the dark web. Anybody can buy it, including the feds. And if you think that they're not there, you're crazy.
Yeah.
And, once they've got it, they've got it. So, yeah, the fact that we let data brokers do their thing for all these years and just kind of shrugged it off is going to come back to haunt us in Trump land. And I think it's probably the biggest danger and one of the harder ones to kind of come to terms with or have an idea about how to fix. Because we can't even find most of these companies. The ones that are registered in the data broker database is just like the cherry on top. It's just a small portion of them. There are all these shady fly-by-night entities.
Yeah. And now, when you've got a shady fly-by-night government,
Pretty much, yeah.
And they're not going to be going after these people and not going to prioritize going after these people, especially if they might be able to be a way for them to make a buck out of it.
They're gonna prioritize buying things from them. Seriously,
right?
That's what it's going to be if they have things that are useful, and most of them do, because that's what they're selling.
Yeah. Andre, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I had a question about the armed robots, the Terminators. Are we looking for like to have automation on these kind of machines, or are they all piloted? Like, are you going to see in the future a robot closing a street that can shoot anyone that comes close enough, or a drone that can drop tear gas and protest with more than 100 people? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's always kind of hard to tell, like, how dystopian is it, like, all going to get?
I mean, the technology exists, to my knowledge.
It does.
They definitely have it.
And we can get a preview from what the military does, because the way this kind of equipment works starts out in the military. They use it in the desert, in the Middle East, and then they bring it back home, right? So you can sort of see what's going on there. So if we take a look at what they're testing and deploying in, say, their military bases in Saudi Arabia, you can sort of see what's out there now and what will be on our streets in 3 or 4 or 5 years when it filters through. And what's there is pretty scary. It's probably not what you're describing yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing that in the next couple of years, which just means it's a couple more years after that, kind of down the road on city streets, which we will see when people start doing, for example, anti-cop protests or something that upsets the powers that be. All of a sudden, they will roll this crap out of the closet, and there it will be.
Yes, and we saw a lot of that expired tear gas and stuff being used. You know, in Portland, we were actually able to identify that for sure as expired tear gas. Somebody took cut out a thing of their shirt and sent it to a lab, and it was like, well, this used to be what's in the tear gas canisters.
Well, you know, it's 10 years. It's been 10 years ago now, which is like astonishing. But I mean, that's what happened in Ferguson. There were loud complaints against police brutality, and all of a sudden they discovered how many Bearcats and tanks the friggin' St. Louis Police Department had. And it was a lot, and nobody knew. And there they were. And that's when they brought them out, which is why I'm saying that all this crap about barricaded suspects and lone gunmen and all the crap that they feed us.
Yeah.
Not how they use it.
Not how it's actually used.
See, when they bring it out of the closet and put it on the street, what it's about. It's about social control.
All right.
So
boo.
Protesting is going to be unexciting.
Protesting is already a shit show. I mean, come on. You go there expecting to get beat up. The press aren't safe anymore. You'll say, hey, I'm a member of the press. It's almost like they go after the press first now, so they can't cover the other violence that they're committing on all the other protesters. And this has been the norm, like you said, for a long time now. Like, you know, Ferguson was like
10 years. Like
10 years.
Yeah.
That was 2014.
2014. Yeah.
And you know, so it's just a question of trying to protect ourselves. But the protesting thing, you know, you basically have to go in full gear. You have to have some kind of protective gear on. You have to bring your gas mask with you. You have to make sure people know where you are, and you have a phone number memorized in case you get arrested. And then really have something specific in mind that you're trying to do, because you're putting your life in danger even going to the damn thing, especially now. Mm-hmm. And it's good. I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying be smart about doing it. You know, don't do it alone and wear gear and stuff. Remember, we had problems, you know, getting hit by cars. Yeah, that was a thing in 2017. And that was the white supremacists like to hit protesters with their cars. It's just what they were doing. It was all the rage for a while. And so it's not, you really have to be careful when you protest now, is all I'm trying to say. And it's not the kind of thing when you come and you bring your 8-year-old anymore or whatever, like it used to be. They've changed the whole nature of protesting. But the theatrical protest is still very useful, and it just confuses people completely. So again, the nonviolent, an entire, center of a college campus with everyone lying on the ground dead, the various theatrical things that people do tend to be more effective. They take longer to do, and you have to be creative and stuff. You have to take a video of it and distribute it yourself because you don't know if you're going to get any news coverage. But it's harder for them to just come in and start beating you up.
It's always good to remember that violence is in the eye of the beholder. It's not always something that you say this is nonviolent, but they may say something else. And there were definitely, for example, pro-Palestine die-ins that were not violent and yet were, savagely.
So protesting just doesn't seem safe to me anymore. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it.
I mean, don't bring your kids. Like, if there's one takeaway from this section, don't bring your kids to protest for the next 4 years. Don't. I mean, not under any circumstances. There is no such thing as a family-friendly protest. That's over. And I think a lot depends on the subject of the protest. I think we should realize that some subjects are hot buttons, and yeah, Palestine is one, and police brutality is another one. And there's a few others out there, usually unequal income distribution, a la Occupy, is not too popular. I think the subject of the protest has an impact in terms of how it's greeted and what kind of response you can expect.
Yeah. And again, someone's asking, has it ever been safe? Yeah. I remember when it was safe. Actually, for me, it stopped being safe in 2003. So that's a long time ago. Literally 20 years ago is the last. I went to a couple Occupy protests, but I was just there kind of supporting. I wasn't really in the front lines. I stayed back.
I will say that, yeah. I mean,
they weren't.
It's never been 100% safe, but I
not like it is now.
Time where in a mass protest,
yeah,
it was a reasonable expectation that you could avoid, being arrested or being beaten up if you were prudent and took measures to protect yourself.
Like, hey, they can't beat us all up, and now that's what they try to do. They try to beat us all up.
And that was true of many mass protests, but not all of them. It was never true of all of them. And it's, there's no guarantee. You can get kettled at any point, right? Stuff happens.
Well, again, kettling. I mean, kettling was our biggest problem in the 2000s. Kettling is just a fancy term for rounding people up and not letting them go anywhere. So if you were they would do it to the press a lot. So the press couldn't go take pictures. But in 2003, again, had some really weird, strange, Kafka-esque moments where we literally were on the street, on Market Street, with 2 legions of SWAT police in SWAT gear coming at us. We had nowhere to go. Yeah. And then we ditched into a restaurant and had lunch while through the glass, we watched everybody else get beat up. Okay. And the whole thing was like, first we were just like hiding out, and then they were like looking at us. They didn't want us just hiding out. So we had to get a table, right? To stay away from getting beat up. And then it was just so weird to be sitting there like eating your lunch while it's literally, people getting beat up out in the street. And then it clears up, and then we go out and there's nobody there, and you're just like, did that really happen?
Yeah.
And so and that stopped me, and having people get beat up right in front of me while I was filming. I had to have somebody watch my back so I could film and not just walk into where people were getting beat up. But I was shocked when this was happening. Okay. This wasn't business as usual. This was like some horrible thing that had taken place. I thought it was just like rogue cops or something. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. They were riding their horses into people.
Yes. I know about the horsey cops.
Yeah. So what was a shock? That's nothing compared to what they do now. Absolutely not. Hitting somebody with a baton and running into them with horses, like that's nothing compared to what they do regularly now when they just come in and start clearing the sidewalks and things.
So one quick thing, and then I have to go.
I know you have to go. It's 4:30.
Yeah, you were talking a little bit about journalists and, the problems that they're going to be facing, which are huge. And I just want to sort of share, because in my other life, I do democratic communications work, and I'm on this listserv with a whole bunch of journalists. And it's not just people like us, you know, independent journalists or movement journalists that are concerned. Like literally, there's like people from the LA Times who are like shaking in their boots about this stuff. So it's important to understand this isn't just.
This isn't a left-wing problem. This is
they always come for the margins first, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there's not a whole lot following that. And
it's mainstream journalists too. This is happening to people from the New York Times.
It
people
is starting
from the
to
Washington
happen,
Post.
and they are scared. They are physically scared. And I think that, you know, a lot of the reporting that we've seen through this whole process has something to kind of do with that. They are physically scared of what's going to happen to them.
Okay. You said you had to go 4:30. Thanks so much for staying.
Thank you, Tracy.
Really appreciate it.
And lots of interesting and cool comments in the chat. Not all of which we could respond to, or I could respond to, but I'm glad that it got people thinking and talking.
Yeah, exactly. Boston Dynamics dog. Yes. In fact, they have robot dogs in the Bronx now that are scaring the shit out of people all the time.
Yes. Just not with guns yet.
No, they're not armed, but it's scary enough to have this robot. They have been used, and they use them for crowd control. They just use them for crowd control. And because it's the Bronx and not an area of people with a lot of money, they haven't been able to just, you know, hire somebody. And I'm not sure it would work anyway if you sued them, but I'm just saying, if they let robot dogs loose on Wall Street, I think we might be getting a different response, you know, in terms of like, of course, this is not right. You
would think, yes.
you would hope. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for coming on. We'll be in touch.
Sure.
Okay, great. Our next speaker is Grant, who does the helps me out with production when we do these. And he's going to be talking about the jury trials and social media. And I'll just let you get started. Take it away, Grant.
Oh, well, thanks, Lisa. I've been having a great time listening to all these interesting talks. And how interesting, as always, journalism came up right at the end of that last talk. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some legal journalism today. I have to share my screen here. I'm doing double duty, as Lisa said. So allow me to bring up my presentation for you.
Great. Yes, and we are a pro-journalist organization. I mean, I've been a journalist for, oh God, I'm so old. I think 35 years now, since 35, 40 years maybe, since I was in college, and since I was actually in high school, my last year before college. And yeah, this kind of stuff was absolutely unheard of then. The attacks on journalists like that would make the papers, for instance, if it happened, right? And now it's not even a footnote, frankly, at the protests. They just think of that. So take it away, Grant.
Oh, well, thank you, Lisa, and I agree. And interestingly, so a little bit of it, I'm not really going to talk about attacks on journalism in this presentation. I'm going to actually talk about attacks on the jury system, and by proxy, social media and some sort of new age journalism comes in. But you can see the title of the presentation. It's more broad than just jury trials. It's more looking at the inviolability of jury deliberations in the context of jury trials, and I'm going to use a case study because this topic is very hard to talk about in the abstract, you know, people attacking the jury process. But if you use a case study, you can flesh some of this out. And interestingly, the jury process and how it can be impacted by outside factors came up in the appeal in this case. And I'm going to use that to kind of close out the talk. So if you're from the Northeast of the United States, you know the case that's on the screen. It's the Karen Reed case. If you're not from the Northeast in the United States, it's just a criminal case. But the reason I use this case is for a number of reasons. One, there was this time when I was in the courtroom and my friend who works for the New York Post got this great picture of me reacting to a leaked email where the defendant and one of her lawyers were talking trash about the other lawyer. and that email's on your screen, you can see, but you don't get that very often, and so there's that picture. But before I really begin, because this case is heavy, it is about the death of a former Boston police officer who was out drinking with his girlfriend one night during a blizzard. And I just want to point out that this case is very controversial. So especially in the area of the country where it's taking place, it's unfortunate in criminal cases that the life and legacy of the victim can sometimes be lost. I'm not trying to do that here with this case study. I'm making a point about what's happened around this case, but I want to emphasize the life and legacy of John O'Keefe do matter. And I'm going to only be presenting a very small, truncated overview of the facts of this case, and that's not an insult to anyone involved. It is just I only have a short amount of time. So there are some pictures of John. He absolutely was known as a funkle, and he in 2012 actually stepped up and adopted his two double orphaned family members after their mother passed away from cancer and their father passed away from a heart attack. So the case study. On January 28th of 2022, John O'Keefe and this woman you see on the screen there, her name is Karen Reed, were in a dating relationship that had kind of gone off the rails about a month earlier. Karen had mistaken John hugging a family friend on a New Year's trip in Aruba as John cheating. She got mad at him, started an affair of her own a few weeks later, and the relationship was really on the rocks. The night of the 28th and the 29th, or the early morning of the 29th of January 2022, this timeline is not easy to see. I'm not going to go through all these details, but basically, Karen and John went out drinking at a bar because Karen was trying to sort of win John back, so to speak. She didn't want to be kicked out of his life. Karen had about 9 drinks, and then at about midnight, they drove together, Karen and John, over to a house party. At that point, John gets out of Karen's car. After about 7 minutes of them having an argument in the car outside the house, Karen backs up her car while drunk driving to 24.5 miles an hour, allegedly hits John with her car, and then instead of rendering aid or stopping or doing anything, leaves, goes back home for 4 hours to John's house, and then allegedly comes back to the scene of John's death, sees John's body, leaves again, and then returns and eventually confesses to the crime in front of first responders. Now, you may say, okay, that sounds like a very open and shut case. Why is this even up for discussion? Well, over the course of the pretrial process, which started in 2022 after Karen Reed was arrested and went through 2024, what happened was, in my opinion, Karen Reed and her defense team used a novel, I wouldn't call it novel because we've seen it in some criminal cases, but a novel approach to, before the criminal trial started, attempting to influence potential jurors in the case by manipulating the public perception of the case, specifically by introducing evidence that could never come in at a criminal trial because of the rules of evidence, but which you could put out through blogs or maybe unscrupulous journalists. Now, that strategy in particular in the context of this case had very real-world effects. And I am going to show you some of those real-world effects. Now, first of all, I want to give you just some sense of what the atmosphere was like. This was a criminal trial, and there would be cheerleading squads for the defendant standing outside when us as journalists would just be trying to ask this woman questions. They would poke us. They would make it hard for us to ask our questions. And the reason why this is so interesting is that the defense's pre-trial PR campaign involved levying allegations at every single person or animal you could imagine. They said a dog did it at one point. They said a homeowner did it at one. They were blaming anyone and everyone they could. They blamed a child at one point. And so the defense really felt comfortable out in the public arena. But when journalists would go to question them, let's just take a look at how the crowds would react.
Karen, why'd you go back to Fairview before going to Jen McCabe's?
Free Karen Reed! Free Karen Reed!
Karen, why'd you hook Aiden Kearney up with the FBI? Well, that was Mr. Yannetti, wasn't it, Karen? Don't poke me.
Karen, keep going. Keep going.
Oh, she took a different way. Oh, my dear God, he fell. Richie, are you okay? Okay, so I think that's enough to give the point, but I'm just laying the foundation for the atmosphere. And by the way, Lisa, you may have heard me say, "What, Karen, why did you hook some guy named Aiden Kearney up with the FBI?" There is a fascinating subplot to this where Karen Reed had the federal connections, where she walked into the U.S. Attorney's office and got the feds to investigate her own murder investigation. Because there's this...
As if they were going to get to the bottom of it for her or something?
No, it was actually as a favor because the public integrity unit of the DOJ in Boston is run by a guy named Dustin Chow, and his wife got passed over for a promotion in 2015 at the DA's office that's prosecuting Karen Reed, and that guy's been out to get the DA ever since. So this woman walks into his office and says, "I have a way to help you investigate the DA." He does it. Now that's a subplot.
Right, but officially getting back to the point, and no more extraneous details.
Well,
so, what was
more...
the point of her contacting the FBI? Is the point? How does that help her?
Oh, it helped her put out the public narrative that there was something fishy with the case when there wasn't. Part of this pre-trial.
So look, the FBI is investigating, kind of thing.
Got it.
It's not open and shut. Okay, but there were witnesses. Were there any witnesses when she hit the guy? Was it just the two of them at the time?
They were outside alone, outside of a house, kind of parked at the end of a lawn. There were people in the house, but not outside the house. Correct.
So no witnesses.
No witnesses outside, just her and the guy she killed.
Okay. So yeah. So generalize it a little bit more, so we're not so into the details of this, because I'm having trouble trying to follow what point you're making.
Oh, sure. So this is just laying the foundation for the fact that there's a lot of talk going on about this case in the public. It's attracted a lot of attention. The reason I bring that up is that's a strategy when the trial hasn't happened yet. It's important.
Right. It's what you do. It's what you do when you're a defendant and you did it. You do that as much as you can.
Yes, but it went a little bit. Yes. And that's a normal reaction, but it went a little bit overboard here, which is this next part of the story, which is another clip we're going to watch. And unlike most criminal trials, this evolved to people following witnesses to their children's soccer games, people smearing semen on pictures of the witnesses' children and mailing it to them, and other things like that. So booing
What's the overall theme that we're learning here?
Sure. So basically, after all of this witness intimidation happens, the jury has to actually have this trial while these hordes of people are outside the courtroom. We didn't actually hear how bad the witnesses were tormented, but it got very bad. But the jury has to actually try this case after 2 years of all this public relations nonsense. And they have to come through these crowds. They saw the news before they became jurors. No one could avoid it. And eventually they try the case, and, it gets to 6 weeks and they vote. And they deadlock 9-3 guilty on manslaughter. And then they don't come to a verdict on murder 2 and leaving the scene of an accident, which is what she was charged with. And when
how could they not? Hold on. Leaving the scene is the one thing that even she said she did.
Well, there was some dispute as to whether she knew she hit him initially.
Because she was so drunk.
Yes.
That's
so
not
whether
a defense for hit and run.
But to leave the scene of an accident causing death, I think she had to know she left the scene. But I don't know what the jurors were thinking.
Okay, but I'm just saying, somebody being too drunk to not know they hit somebody is a common thing. And it's not a defense, just to be clear.
Oh, I agree. And I think that's why they voted 9-3 guilty on manslaughter.
Okay. Oh, yeah. But it was something. It had to be manslaughter, second degree. What was second degree even doing in there?
You can get to second degree murder in Massachusetts by someone committing a reckless underlying act. So if you do an act that a reasonable person knew or should have known could cause death, you can get charged with second degree murder.
Okay, that was probably a mistake on the prosecutor's part, in my opinion, because it probably would have. It never helps when you have both the charges there, and it's harder to prove second degree.
Well, it's fascinating how quickly you came to that conclusion. I know you're just learning the case and at this very high level, but that's what a lot of legal experts have said, that they probably shouldn't have charged murder too, and they would have, but that's so, Lisa, you're as bad as I'm doing explaining this quickly. You did a great job picking up on the issue.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what, so that, okay. So the point is she was able to use social media to, hey, sound familiar? Something that just happened to our country, right? You are able to use to promote a false narrative that puts in just enough confusion, just enough suspicion on enough things to where people aren't sure what they think anymore. And in this case, it ended up in a mistrial, I think, because you put mistrial. In our case, in the elections case, people stayed home. I didn't realize people had stayed home until yesterday. Until they talked about how there were actually much less people voting, which is actually better. I thought the Democrats had showed up and voted for Trump, but no, they just didn't show up.
Yep. No, that's a great insight. And that kind of, Exactly. That's what I'm driving at, which is the impact of social media. Now, one thing I do want to play, because Lisa, I do think this is important. It wasn't just that they were trying to poison the jury. They were tormenting the people who heard this woman confess. And I just want to play a quick clip of what these witnesses.
We receive letters, we receive emails, we receive calls. People drive by our house. There was a rolling rally outside of my house where people just screamed at us. They take pictures of our children. They took a picture of my daughter and put semen on it and said property of some named blogger that I think the defense is very familiar with.
So you can see, and I highlight that because if this were just legal, if it were just legal posture, and that was a witness, by the way, one of the witnesses who later in the morning heard this woman confess to her crime. But if it were just legal posturing, saying, hey, the law should be interpreted this way or it should be changed, and they were doing PR that way, then I'd have some sympathy for it as a tactic. But doing that to witnesses to win a case using smears, it's like in the political realm, propagandizing people to stay home or whatever. It's very disingenuous, and I don't like it. But that's just a personal.
No, it should be illegal.
So just illegal. To quickly summarize,
it is illegal to do that to jurors, right?
Well, that was done. So, okay, here's where I'm going next. Thank you for that question. So that's what happened to the witnesses. Now I'm going to show you what happened to the jurors, which is even worse, if that's even possible. This is the note that the jurors sent on their last day of deliberation. It's a very Jeffersonian-esque note. This foreperson was very eloquent. They basically say, we've tried very, very hard. We have difference of opinion, we're deadlocked. Okay, so we don't know the votes on count 1 and 3, but we know 9-3 guilty on count 2. Clearly, the 3 not guilty votes on count 2 we're not going to budge, so they deadlocked. Normal stuff. This could happen in any criminal trial. It gets retried. I've seen cases retried 3 or 4 times sometimes. But what's not normal is what happened next. Jurors came forward. A juror came forward, and normally in Massachusetts, juror lists can be released to the public after a trial. Jurors came forward and said, please do not release this list because people are threatening us. And the jurors submitted an affidavit. Now you might say, all jurors get a little, this is a public process, transparency. I want to show you what this was like, what these jurors were getting threatened with. It was serious.
Trying to police that. Imagine trying to police that. Just like you can never say this person's name on the internet. You can never say this person's name on the internet. Like, good luck fucking policing that, boomer.
What does that even have to do
with
anything?
You gotta imagine,
Grant,
thinking you could do that.
And by the way,
imagine thinking.
So the order goes out. So the order goes out saying you cannot dox these jurors. An order goes out saying you can't do that. They do it anyway. They just go online and dox the jurors. And so what
Right.
that clip was showing was after the juror got doxxed, the person saying, haha, doesn't matter what the court says, we're going to do it anyway. And I'm just sitting there like, how is this legal?
So no one goes after them.
Which goes to your point, which is a regular person watching this is saying like, okay, so why isn't anyone doing anything about this? You know, and I share your sentiments, but I'm not even finished, which is somehow shocking.
Okay, wrap it up.
Eventually,
it's been 20
we're
minutes.
almost done. Eventually,
Okay.
eventually she appeals. The appeal is going right now, and the rule is jurors cannot be interrogated about their deliberations because we don't want people going on social media threatening them. That's literally the reasoning in the court's order. She says, oh, I don't agree with that. She appeals. The appeal's ongoing. The point, though, is our system of justice is, look at the coverage that I'm getting for covering this stuff. It's ridiculous how much people are paying attention to these cases, and not in a way that I believe is healthy, although I try to smile while doing it.
And he said, she said, yeah.
And unfortunately, fundamentally, all of this stuff is causing our legal system to forget about the actual people who are harmed. And that's what I'm worried about. So thanks, Lisa.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, Andre, ask him.
So, Grant, you're narrating almost like a Chicago plot, like using the media and people to manipulate the jury to get a sentence and different sentence. This seems like a lot of work. What kind of attorney does she have, or is there an organization helping her do that? It seems like a lot of work.
Oh, thank you for that question. Her attorney is she has two attorneys. They're both very powerful. Alan Jackson, who used to represent Harvey Weinstein, and David Yannetti, who's a powerful Boston criminal attorney. And she's raised multiple millions of dollars through her network of supporters for this.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And again, that's how, yeah. So these kinds of things are, you know, because she had to have money, and the lawyers are in on it in terms of all the other stuff, that it's all working together. You know, the idea that the lawyers don't have any idea about that other stuff that's going on is bullshit.
And by the way,
right.
I'll leave you with this. I'm not the only one covering this. You will eventually see a Netflix documentary. Like, you will see real, like, big stories about this. I'm giving a bit of an early preview, and I did this in 12 minutes the other day when I practiced, but I'm tired tonight. So sorry about that.
Okay. No problem. Oh, you have another question? Go ahead.
And all of these posts in social media are being monetized also. So the story is also generating money to pay for everything. And that's crazy.
And I'm worried that there are contracts, like donation split contracts or certain deals negotiated where, like, you know, hypothetically, a criminal defender will say, hey, you with a YouTube channel, cover my case a certain way. And, you know, for every, you know, $500 in donations, I'll take 300, you take 200. And I'll give you exclusive access to my story. I think that's happening. I don't think we have any way to address it. And I'm actually watching it literally metastasize within our justice system, because prosecutors are then saying, okay, we have no way to deal with this. They're starting to employ some of these tactics, which is even more horrifying. It's very bad. Very, very bad.
All right. Well, thank you very much for telling us about all that. Let's see. Is Ryan on the call?
Hello.
Hey, glad you made it.
Right.
We can hear you. Excellent. Okay, great. Ryan's going to tell us about, going to give us sort of our VR update for the year. And I will let you take it away, Ryan.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all having a good Saturday. I know some of you might know me, but some might not. This year's update is going to be called The Next Layer of Reality, Social Identity, and the New Creator Economy. And first, little background about me. I'm Ryan Sternlicht. I do a bunch different things around the Bay Area, including help out with some VR and AR stuff, a number of different nonprofits, and do a lot of different event work around the West Coast mostly. But today I'm mostly going to be focusing on VR and specifically kind of the area that we're finally getting to a point of in terms of software, hardware, and social stuff is that we've finally kind of gotten a few social spaces that seem to be somewhat stable, though a lot of them have their issues. If you know about VR stuff, you've probably heard of VR chat, which is the big one. It's been around for a very long time, and uh, most of the community uses it quite a bit. There's also a new one, somewhat new one called Resonite that is built by the people who do Neos VR. They have a lot of experience with it. And then a lot of people know Meta's one.
We're just going to adjust the mic here because it's so crackly. Just use the other mic. Do whatever you did during sound check.
It's the same mic.
You didn't have that during, it wasn't crackling like that during sound check. So I don't know what happened, but maybe use the one on your computer or use a different mic.
Yeah. Let me see. Is it trying to use?
No, it's using that one. You can tell. Are you able to use your computer microphone?
Chrome doesn't like switching mics very easily.
All right, never mind. Go ahead.
Sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Let me get it a bit closer.
Just wanted to try.
Check something quickly.
Yeah, it's just crackling in the background. It's not, it's just an ongoing crackle sound in the background.
Okay, I don't know if that's going to help at all.
No, that made it worse. Put it back to wherever it was.
Okay. That's odd.
All right, just go back to the first thing and go back. It's okay. You tried. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. I have no idea why the audio...
Just go back. Just start again.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So, as I was talking about, Horizon Worlds is the one that people know is Meta's, and it's pretty corporatized. You do not have much control over your identity other than being able to change certain things like clothes or add a 3D scan of your face depending on the world. But it doesn't really give you the ability to have your own identity in the way that VRChat or Resonite allow, which all comes down to avatars and digital, basically your digital identity embodied, which is kind of the big thing that people are starting to get used to, is having a embodiment of themselves on the internet or in different platforms, which can allow for much more human types of interaction. It's been shown many times that if you're only talking through text, you can be a lot harsher than when you're in person. And this does actually also apply in VR, where if you have any form of face or body that social interactions become a lot more natural, and people are very easily able to understand certain body language and different things like tone a lot more, which can actually at times solve some of the current problems of social interaction on the internet, where everything becomes either an echo chamber, very toxic, or completely blown out of proportions from a very small situation. So having a identity that is embodied on the internet, it can be very helpful. It also requires having an avatar usually, which there's some free tools to get avatars, such as Feroid, Booth, which is a Japanese company, Ready Player Me, and then there are some AI based generative tools that are being worked on quite heavily, like Hyperhuman Chat Avatar and Unreal, the one Unreal uses, which is MetaHuman. Those are two of the big ones right now, and there's a few more on the way, though I can't talk about any certainties for a few of them. But the problem with using a lot of these is that you often don't actually own the rights to these avatars properly. And this actually has become a notable legal battle a few times in recent years over people's avatars and whether or not they own them when these avatars are created by other companies and other people. Um, and when it's something that represents your identity online, you very much want to properly own it. Even if someone else created that avatar, you want to own it, and it's pretty hard sometimes to figure out the legal situation of some of these avatars, especially depending on the country they were created in, because that's actually where the copyright of these avatars originates, is with the creator in the creator's um, location. So knowing your way around that can be very complicated at the moment, and very few people know how to handle dealing with that. And this is even harder when it comes to the individualized avatars that people can commission. These are generally much higher quality than most of the other ones, but they cost a lot. A normal to very high-end 3D model with face tracking, eye tracking, full body, those range from at the low end $1,000 well up to $6,000 or $7,000 for an avatar.
So you have to make sure that it's a work for hire. If you're buying an avatar, you have to make sure that the rights are coming along with it to do as you please.
Yes.
And if you don't have a contract saying so, then you don't know. It won't come up until you're using it in some kind of commercial application or something. Until you're successful, then they'll come after you. But if you commission an avatar, you need to get something in writing from them that you own it for everything you want to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people forget to do that, and this has caused like multi-million-dollar problems in the past couple of years, where small creators might buy or commission an avatar, and then 4 or 5 years later they become big and start making money as a personality online, and then all of a sudden they try to go make merchandise or something, and their avatar or creator is like, you aren't allowed to do that. This actually happened earlier this summer with a big streamer who wanted to do a um figure of their avatar, and they then found out that the avatar they bought from Japan actually didn't come with merchandising commercialization rights, and they were like, uh-oh.
Right. So the
But
rule here,
yeah.
if you're an artist and you're selling your work, you want to make it as narrow as possible so you can charge more for different things. If you're buying the artwork, you want to have all rights. It's got to say everything in perpetuity. You don't want to have certain uses. You don't want to have it be not for this, not for that. You don't want to have any limitations at all on it when you're getting it. Otherwise, it's not a true work for hire. The definition of a work for hire is you have bought and paid for it and you own all of it, and or whatever you've agreed to, if you get into that. So as a buyer of avatars, you always want to make sure that it is licensed for all uses so that they can't come after you later when you try to make t-shirts or something. But if you're an artist selling your work and they want something for all uses, then you charge more for it since it's for all uses. So it depends on what side you're on in terms of how you want to play it. I always tell the artist to make sure that you get paid for every use, but when you're buying art, that's not what you want. So it just depends on what side of the coin you're on. And if it is commercial uses, you want that to be general. Again, on your side, you want it to be any commercial use. If you're selling it, you might want to specify only, especially if you're not getting paid that much. The first thing you want to do is be like, okay, but this is just, you can only use it in VR chat. You can't put it on a shirt, is the easiest way to explain it to people. And then if they want to put it on a shirt or might want to put it on a shirt, that's your cue to negotiate for more money. So it just depends on what side you're on that. I just had to give my little 2 cents.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you
Ryan.
so much. Like, you put it in very easy terms to understand. And
it sounds easy now, but it took me 20 years to figure that
out. But on the other side of that, even if you aren't commissioning this because you want to be a big star someday and you just want to have an avatar, it is still important to have your rights in order so that people can't copy you or can't rip you off or use. The thing with a lot of these 3D models and avatars is they're much easier to steal than a physical identity. It's literally, if you're in VR chat, you can basically steal anyone else's models. And then use them if you know what you're doing. Which, if you become someone famous, these people can use AI voices and basically get you in a model to say anything, which can be problematic as people's virtual identities start to become more prevalent. And
this is getting fought out in the courts right now, that Scarlett Johansson case and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, it's getting a bit complicated, and I think it's kind of headed in a good direction at the moment, but it could easily become very problematic very quickly if some of this stuff gets misused as people become more used to virtual identities. There is a kind of actually funny recent example was during a open house that I think it was Bernie Sanders had Sykkuno, a big streamer internationally known, used their VR model during that discussion, and that could very easily be edited to say anything, much more easier than it's easier than a deep fake. And that can be problematic, especially as AI voice is based on real people are getting very, very easy to generate. And it's that sort of stuff is somewhat problematic, but
Can't
we
control it.
still,
I don't see how
yeah,
we're going to be able to control it, moving
yeah,
forward.
this is going to be hard to control. The best answer for some of these things I've seen is different sorts of metadata asset tags that prove something is the original. I don't want to say blockchains, but more like authenticated databases
Right,
of
right. And authenticated
things. Yeah.
twins too. Actually, there's a company
Yeah.
called Twin Protocol
Yep.
that
Yeah.
does digital twins. And so the idea is that everybody is probably going to have an official digital twin. And if it isn't coming from the official digital twin, then it's a fake. It's pretty, it will be simple, but that's 10 years from now and everybody has, or maybe 5. I don't think it's going to be that long actually. When famous people anyway are likely to have digital twins to talk to their fans all day or to answer questions about a product. It's going to be really helpful for customer service. So anything where you have a community that you're going to sharing ideas in and stuff like that. I'm thinking about making one just because I can't resist. Making one to answer questions and things. And then the idea is that, if it's coming from your digital twin, but like you said, I mean, you can do that now where, I have another podcast with a robot and the robot is talking and her lips are kind of going with the words, but it would be so easy to just put in another sound file like you can do now, because even streaming and stuff, a lot of times people's lips don't match. Like, it's very easy to fake things. And so it seems like the tools for authentication and verification are the only way. We're not going to be able to watermark all the fakes or whatever, but we can at least clearly identify
the real
real, the one who's the authentic, the authorized digital twin.
Yep. And I remember at DWeb Camp this summer talking with a group, I'm forgetting their names, that specialize in verifying media authentication and basically allowing people to tag any sort of data in a way that if it's altered from the original, you're able to tell by checking versus the original, basically. And I could see that sort of system be implemented very quickly once it's built out on lots of different platforms for security of, like, I don't know if YouTube or Twitch would take the initiative to do that, but for protecting their creators, it would be very valuable of being like, this is a original clip from so and so. It has not been edited in any way, and then here is the proof that it hasn't been. And that I can see for digital identities being incredibly valuable. I mean, that's valuable just for the internet in general, is if we can verify clips or articles or images that they haven't been tampered with. But
that's a whole other thing. So
yeah, that's
a whole other thing. So
big.
you've got like 10 minutes left. So go ahead and finish up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, the thing with the creator economy side of it is one of those things where a lot of people who I know of artists who are worried about finding work. This has been a massive boom for a lot of artists, is whether 3D or 2D, is learning the skills to make these 2Ds and 3D models. And it pays pretty well if you're good at it. And as more people join up, the overall cost will go down. Also, as the tools expand in their quality, whether I know some artists really don't want to touch AI tools, but there are certain parts of many common tool sets that are already partially AI driven with their modifiers. And it if people can all find and or create their online like avatar identity, this will I think it will help a lot with people creating communication in this like evolving world of social media. And like the landscape has been changing quicker than ever in a lot of these different ways. I'm going to switch tabs to just show a few of the things I mentioned. But first, let me go to this slide, which this is a lot of the references I used in this presentation. And then if people have any questions, I am happy to oh, someone brought up Jesse Schnell's Art of Game Design. Yeah, so that was the first game design book I ever read. So yeah, it's been out a while, but I definitely love that book. It still is very relevant. Yeah, let me stop sharing
and then there's another comment about it's time we begin to embrace cryptographic signatures more. Yeah,
yes.
AI needs to do it too.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
AI without cryptographic signatures, basically you're going to be able, the only way we could ever control how the data is reused anyway, is we would make certain parts of it, encrypt everything and make certain parts of it available for what we want, just like with regular data. The AI world is just starting to think about this, really. But the VR world is as bad about this as they are about everything, frankly. The VR world is just horrible about security. It's horrible about cryptographic hashes. It's horrible about licensing. It's just acting like everything's okay and it's a free-for-all over there. And it won't be once they start to crack down. They have complete control, and unless you can prove the provenance of your avatar provenance is going to be a very important thing. And right now there's just about no ways of doing it unless you have some old world way, like a contract that you got when you bought it or something, a receipt with a license on it or something. Instead of building all this stuff into VR, they're going to have to go back and do it. So that's a bummer. And yeah, there's another comment about VR lobbies and VR chat, especially. And you can launch your own instance of a world without the other people in VR chat, which is something I didn't know for a while. And it it can go both ways. You get in there and there's other people there, and it can be really cool. And you talk to the other people and you're hanging out and it's all like kind of futuristic and cool. Or you get these jerks in there that are interfering with your experience, whatever it is. I'm fine if people want to go run around in the corner or whatever, but it interferes with you. So now I just always launch my own instance that doesn't have people in it. But that's a thing. Again, a new user isn't going to know that. And I know a lot of people that got turned off by VR chat and eventually VR altogether for that one reason, because they would come into the world and feel kind of pushed around, or there'd be kids in there or whatever. And you can't think straight. There's just all this back channel stuff. So yeah, that's an issue. And let's see. Oh yeah. So there's sometimes you can add custom code. They're saying Matrix's third room was working on an in-game window for adding custom WSM code to your world. Yeah. And this was pre-latest Gen AI. So yeah, I think it's a combo, and Gen AI too is really useful. It's really useful when you're trying to upgrade some video, upscale some video. Or doing a lot of things that you can only do with AI. And now we have it. When I'm watching a colorized movie from, 1905, I like it, right? And then if there's other things, if somebody wants to train on artist data without asking, well, okay, now we're back to like the dark sides of Gen AI, or the way that everybody's flooding the internet with all this Gen AI crap now, and it's actually messing with everything. So there's two sides to all that. But I tell you, if you want to whip up an avatar that looks just better than the corny default one, and you're not trying to make it actually look like you, or maybe if you are, but you don't have to. I think Gen I is going to be very empowering. There's already Gen I engines for generating avatars that are very useful, and to the people who aren't artists, it's kind of the only way that they could get an avatar, try to get a nice looking avatar. So go ahead and tell us what you're going to tell us about that.
I did want to showcase some of the things I mentioned earlier, like some of the AI ones, like you mentioned. So like one of the somewhat well-known ones that I've tested bit is Hyperhuman Chat Avatar by Demos. So this one you can generate from text a face. So let's do anime face female 30. Like, let's see how. Oh, wait, I forgot. I'm not logged in right now. Dang it. But you can see some examples of this, and
they really start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But, like, you can upload an image, then it will convert it to a actual 3D mesh, and then you can apply these meshes on top of different avatars. So you can take a real image of yourself, or if you have a character you want to be, you can do that. You can also, it's pretty cool what these can do. Also, for assets and stuff, there's some new really cool tools. Like I beta tested this, which is a 3D model from a text, basically, which is actually quite insane. So you can do text input, you can do multi-view input. It then generates a voxel point cloud and then will allow some rough edits. It is very cool to see these different tools being able to evolve within months. Like this was in beta, like v like 0.2 only 4 months ago. Yeah,
Cool.
it's
All right, cool. Anything else you want
very
to show us
cool.
real quick before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I that mentioned it, like where I'm getting these prices. If you think they're crazy, like this is a pretty well-known 3D modeler who makes professional 3D models for some streamers or individuals, and yeah, $6,000 start. Other ones starting 1,800. Yeah, so it's expensive right now.
But
It
those are
is,
the really tricked out avatars that you
yeah,
see
but
too. You know.
the base of them is mostly all the same. It's just the customization to make it individual is right now what takes a lot of effort because the tools are not fully developed to make it easy to make individual. Um, uh, but yeah, it's
That's
really
the goal,
cool.
though. The goal is
Yeah,
actually to have the tools where we can make them ourselves, and then
yep,
be able to take like a 3D model that we've made in Blender and
yeah,
import it and throw some magic at it and have a working avatar. I mean, that's where this is going,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and
Great.
it's moving fast, which is good. But since it's moving so fast, I'm worried about things like what we talked about earlier with um ownership and verifiability of stuff, which
Well, it's
those I
already
yeah.
again. There's no, you can't go anywhere but up
True,
from where it is
true.
now because it's just a free for all
Yeah.
now, and you
Yeah.
can kind of steal what you want, and it doesn't matter. And if you're using a table, there's a lot of free assets and things that these all have.
Yeah.
You know, libraries and there's lots of free stuff that you can use. But it's also, I remember in Second Life when I would borrow things, I would say, that's really cool. I think I'll make a copy of that and stick it in my world, you know, stick it in my thing. And it wasn't hard to do. And that's kind of where we're at. And if you're talking about a table that you made, maybe you don't care, but maybe you do care. And it's just about an easy way of specifying that. Otherwise, it'll just be a different scenario when I go to copy the table and I can't.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, well, can't steal the table. Maybe I'll go get a free one or buy one or something, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just, but so for avatars, this avatar thing is really something that is going to help. I think it needs to get fully baked for the VR thing to really take control. People get really into how they look in there. It's really easy to look like shit and forget about it. I used to use the default avatar in Second Life, and I just never changed it because I was like, why bother? And I'd be hanging out with my really like elite higher up friends with their beautiful avatars. And sometimes there was literally like this, like they were embarrassed to be seen with me. They're absolutely, you know,
yeah,
because it's like, what are you, a noob? You know,
it's like wearing pajamas everywhere when you're out with friends or something. Like you're going to a cool concert and you're just like wearing pajamas or high-end bar or something. And
yeah.
it's kind of the same in VR at times where like it is a
it's more like junior high
space.
when you're like,
yeah,
when you're like, oh, they've got the designer jeans, I want to hang out with them, you know. It's a little bit funny, but I think the level field will get played. The level field will be leveled soon enough. All right, thanks a lot, Ryan.
Yeah,
appreciate it. Thanks for
so
coming
much.
on.
See ya.
Okay, we've got one more talk. It's actually a recorded talk, and it's from Michael Karpeles, who many of us know as Mech at the Internet Archive. And he wanted to make sure, he's actually out of the country right now and wasn't able to present, but he wanted to give a talk about the open library, which is something that Aaron and Brewster started that Mech is now the lead on. And his presentation is When It Rains at the Archive, Build an Ark, Book Bans, Lawsuits, and Breaches. And Grant, are you ready to roll that video?
Welcome Aaron Swartz Day. Thank you for helping keep Aaron's memory alive. My name is Mech. I'm the program lead for the Internet Archive's Open Library, co-founded by Aaron. This year, more than 500,000 books have been removed from lending by publishers through lawsuits, even classics like 1984. Nearly a month of our staff's time has been sunk responding to cybersecurity threats. Across the country, we're witnessing book bans and attacks against libraries. My message to you is that the days when it's most difficult to be a library are also the days it's most critical to be a library. Libraries don't just exist to enable access to patrons on sunny days. To be a library is to fight for the right for libraries to exist. And this requires planning for rainy days. So throughout 2024, the leadership team of Aaron's Open Library has been prioritizing strategy and scenario planning, bringing our efforts into alignment with the Internet Archive so that we can address the core needs of our patrons, no matter what comes our way. The most important reminder in this process for us has been we are not alone, and we miss our biggest opportunities if we proceed into the future alone. Project Gutenberg, LibriVox, Standard eBooks, OpenStax, Wikisource, Brie, and dozens of other progressive digital access projects are facing similar challenges to the Internet Archive and the Open Library. We have an opportunity to unite and realize power in our numbers. On December 3rd, the Open Library community will come together at 9 a.m. Pacific to transform the most promising ideas from our months of strategic planning into a roadmap that we can all be proud of. I hope you'll visit openlibrary.org/volunteer to learn more and join us in this planning session. Let's work together as a community to build an ark or an archive that carries millions of physical books safely over troubled water into a bright digital future. Thanks for your time. Cheers.
Yay, thanks, Mech. And I wanted to show this that I keep behind me. I have to whip it out every few years. This is a Japanese internment camp poster from 1942, right here in my hometown, literally where I went to elementary school, that area, where they're telling people to show up with nothing but bedding and linens, toilet articles, extra clothing, cutlery, and then they say essential personal effects, whatever that means. And this is what's coming with the Trump administration, our internment camps for immigrants. Who's an immigrant? I mean, which immigrants? Whoever they feel like targeting at the time, as far as I can tell. No one will be safe. And this is another reason why the surveillance work that the Aaron Swartz Day surveillance, police surveillance project does is so important, because there's already a lot of illegal activity going around harassing immigrants. This is particularly at the border, the California border between California and Mexico. We already have a problem with deputizing local police and sheriff as immigration agents. And this is just a thing they started doing contractually a few years ago that we've been trying to stop. This is, of course, what Trump wants to do nationwide. So it's a real threat, and always a sad day when I have to not just have this in the background, but, you know, bring it out. And I just wanted to end with that. So thanks for coming. It was great. We had a great audience today. Lots of discussion. Lots of good, I don't know, just it was nice to be together. We don't have any answers as far as how to protect ourselves, but we will be here and listening to you, and we'll be here every month. Like I said, Gavin Grimm is going to be our guest next month. I'm very excited about that. Gavin Grimm, who had the landmark Supreme Court case protecting youths in their school bathrooms, something that is sort of bizarre, that you had to have a case to protect youth in their own in the bathroom so they can go to the bathroom that they want to. Wow. Okay. That's what we're fighting for. So it'll be really exciting to have Gavin next show. And Andre, anything you want to say before we call it a day?
I want to say thank you, everyone. And remember, solidarity and community. That's 2 things we can do the next years.
Thank you. Good way to end. Thank you so much, everybody. And we'll see you again soon.